The old Juki hit the bottom of the scrap container with a sound I felt behind my ribs. Vanessa watched the bent metal settle beneath torn cardboard and said, "That is where dead weight belongs." My founder badge was already gone. My name had already been erased from the anniversary program. And I had no idea that 19 days later, she would be the one standing outside those doors while a court officer read my ownership rights aloud. Before I tell you how that happened, let me welcome you. Wherever you are listening from, I hope you will tell me in the comments how you found this channel, because I have learned that stories travel along roads we never see. Any resemblance between this story and real people or events is entirely coincidental. Still, the feelings in it are real enough to anyone who has watched a sacrifice become invisible in the eyes of people who benefited from it. That Friday morning began with steam from my iron and the faint medicinal smell of sewing machine oil. I was 66 years old, widowed for 8 years, and living in the same narrow brick house in Guadalupe where my husband Daniel and I had raised our 2 children. The kitchen tiles were cream once, though the grout had darkened around the stove. A Magnolite pot rested upside down beside the sink, and when the early sun struck its worn aluminum, I could still see the shallow dent Daniel made in 1996 when he dropped it during a blackout. I pressed my navy dress on the dining table because my ironing board had lost one rubber foot and rocked whenever I leaned on it. The dress had cost 1,180 Mexican pesos at a department store sale 3 years earlier. I had altered the waist twice. First after Daniel died and food lost its taste, then again when my appetite returned in careful pieces. On the left cuff, I had sewn 3 tiny blue stitches that no one else would notice. Daniel used to put 3 stitches inside every garment he made for me. One for yesterday, one for today, and one for whatever came next. The invitation to Mercer Rourke Workwear's 25th anniversary lay beside my coffee. Heavy ivory stock, embossed silver letters, no handwritten note. The company name still carried mine, but the schedule listed Vanessa Rourke as founder and chief executive officer. Beneath her name were 6 sponsors, 3 municipal officials, and a procurement director from a hospital group. I appeared nowhere. I told myself it was an oversight. People who have spent their lives repairing fabric become skilled at repairing explanations. Vanessa was busy. The printer had used an old file. The event planner was young. Each excuse lay neatly beside the next like folded shirts, and I refused to look beneath them. The truth was that Vanessa had been teaching me to accept disappearance in small portions. No single omission seemed large enough to confront. My photograph moved from the reception wall to a corridor. Quarterly meetings shifted from my kitchen table to video calls scheduled during my medical appointments. The company Christmas card changed from our signatures to a printed message from the executive office. Each change could be explained as growth. Growth had once been our shared dream. When Vanessa first entered my workshop in February 2001, rainwater dripped from the edge of her red umbrella onto the concrete floor. She wore a black skirt, practical shoes, and a cream blouse with one button hanging by a thread. She had come to collect 12 restaurant aprons ordered by her brother-in-law. But she spent 20 minutes examining our cutting table and asking how many garments we could produce in a week. 140 if the fabric behaves, I told her. Fabric does not behave. People plan. The answer annoyed Daniel. It impressed me. Vanessa had worked in hotel purchasing and understood contracts I had never seen. She knew buyers who dismissed home workshops without inspecting the work. Within a month, she arranged a meeting with Hotel Mirador del Norte. Daniel and I brought 8 samples in garment bags borrowed from a neighbor. The purchasing manager kept us waiting in a corridor for 50 minutes. I wanted to leave. Vanessa walked to the receptionist, asked for the manager's direct line, and called him while standing 10 meters from his office. "We have occupied your corridor longer than it takes Mrs. Mercer to sew one chef's coat," she said. "If quality matters, give her 10 minutes. If it does not, we will sell to a hotel where it does." We got the meeting. The first order was 800 coats at 286 Mexican pesos each, a total of 228,800 Mexican pesos. It was more money than our workshop had billed in the previous 6 months. We could not afford the fabric deposit. Vanessa invested 92,000 Mexican pesos from savings and negotiated 30-day terms for the balance. In exchange, she received a partnership interest. Daniel wanted to offer 35%. I argued for 48. She brought the door, I said. You built what is behind it, he replied. We settled on 52 for me and 48 for Vanessa because the machines, customer base, and existing debts remain mine. The agreement listed Daniel as operations advisor, but not owner. He preferred it that way. 2 captains are enough, he said. I will keep the boat from leaking. For years, Vanessa earned my trust. When a supplier delivered fabric 4 centimeters narrower than invoiced, she recovered 61,000 Mexican pesos in credits. When a buyer refused 30,000 aprons over a shade variation visible only beneath fluorescent light, she found a school system that accepted them at a reduced price and saved payroll. She remembered employees' birthdays and sent soup when Rosa's husband began dialysis. She was also capable of shame. After shouting at a cutter for a mislabeled bundle, she returned the next morning and apologized in front of the same team. I watched her struggle with the words and respected her for saying them. That history made later cruelty difficult to name. People imagine betrayal arrives wearing a face they have never loved. Often it arrives wearing years of reasons to doubt your own judgment. The first time Vanessa suggested retiring the Juki, she did not call it junk. She called it honored equipment. We had moved into the Apodaca warehouse, and safety consultants recommended guarding or decommissioning older machines. Daniel installed a compliant belt cover himself and moved the Juki to sample production. She stays while she works, he said. Vanessa agreed. Of course, she is the heartbeat. We called the machine she because that is what exhausted people sometimes do with tools that have carried them through years. The Juki never complained, never forgave, and never loved us back. But its steady motor organized our nights. Daniel could tell from the kitchen when I changed speed. He knew by the sound whether I was sewing collars, hems, or button plackets. During the 2008 recession, hotel orders fell 40% in 2 months. We owed 740,000 Mexican pesos to suppliers and had enough cash for 1 payroll. Vanessa proposed laying off 12 employees immediately. Daniel wanted reduced hours shared across the floor. We argued until midnight beside the Juki. Vanessa said sentiment would sink everyone. Daniel said fear made arithmetic look simpler than it was. I calculated that temporary salary reductions, including our own, plus a short-term order for industrial cleaning cloths could preserve all jobs for 6 weeks. The cleaning cloths were ugly squares of gray cotton. We made 180,000 of them. The margin was less than 1 peso each, and lint coated every surface of the workshop. But no one lost employment. On the final night of that order, Daniel showed me the hidden compartment beneath the oil pan. He placed duplicate supplier agreements and an emergency cash ledger inside. Why there? I asked. Because thieves search desks and tired people forget banks close, he said. I laughed and told him he watched too many old movies. He tapped the metal cover with 1 fingernail. Records are not distrust, Evie. They are memory that does not get tired. Vanessa knew we kept duplicates, but not where. At the time, there was nothing secretive between us. She signed the asset ledger herself and thanked Daniel for making the company audit-proof. The change in her came gradually after expansion. Buyers invited her to dinners in San Pedro. Business magazines photographed her in offices that had never seen a loose thread. She learned to speak about scaling, executive vision, and founder dependency. I was proud of her fluency. When she won a state manufacturing award in 2015, Daniel and I sat in the second row and applauded until our hands hurt. The plaque named Vanessa alone. Daniel noticed before I did. On the drive home, he asked why the acceptance speech described the company as a failed workshop she had rescued. It was a story for the room, I said. Stories for rooms become records if no one corrects them. I told him not to be petty. The word remained between us for days. He was not petty. He was afraid that public praise had begun rewarding Vanessa for rewriting collaboration as salvation. I did not want to see it because her success felt connected to mine. If she stood on a stage, I believed some invisible portion of me stood there too. Then Daniel became ill. His pancreatic cancer was diagnosed in March 2017 after weeks of back pain he blamed on lifting fabric rolls. The oncologist spoke in careful percentages. Treatment began at a private clinic because the schedule was faster, costing 186,000 Mexican pesos in the first month. Insurance covered part, savings covered part, and company distributions covered the rest. Vanessa was generous at first. She arranged drivers, moved meetings, and approved advances without argument. She sat with me in the hospital cafeteria while Daniel underwent his first procedure. Her coffee cooled untouched as she promised the company would remain safe. "You take care of him," she said. "I will take care of what you built." I heard loyalty. Perhaps she meant it then. Caregiving narrowed my world. Days became medication times, laboratory values, soups Daniel could tolerate, and invoices I signed in waiting rooms. Vanessa sent board packets electronically. She highlighted signature pages and summarized decisions by phone. Most were legitimate: equipment leases, supplier renewals, insurance changes. The first dangerous shift was a revised banking mandate. She said lenders needed faster decisions while I was unavailable. The document reduced dual signature requirements from 100,000 to 250,000 Mexican pesos, not eliminated them. I signed after Mateo, who was not yet our lawyer, but another company attorney reviewed it. Later versions in Vanessa's records omitted the threshold entirely. My genuine signature on the first mandate became a source she reused. Daniel completed treatment, but never regained strength. He spent more time in the back room listening to the juki than operating it. One afternoon, I found him writing the letter that would later wait in box 417. He covered it with his hand. "Love letter?" I asked. "Administrative romance. Very advanced genre." I kissed his forehead and did not ask again. He died on October 6, 2018, at home before dawn. The room smelled of eucalyptus balm and clean sheets. Rain tapped the awning. His last clear question was whether payroll had gone out. I told him yes, though I had not checked. Vanessa confirmed it later that morning. For months after the funeral, I could not enter the workshop without hearing his absence. Machines make a collective sound when a floor is operating, a broad mechanical breath. Inside that sound, I always expected his cough, his whistle, or the scrape of his chair. When none came, grief reopened. Vanessa suggested I reduce my schedule. She framed it as care. "You have earned rest," she said. "Let professionals handle the pressure." I remained owner, attended quarterly meetings, and signed annual reports. But the meetings grew shorter. Financial summaries became polished slide decks without source statements. When I asked for ledgers, Clara said the accounting system no longer produced old-fashioned printouts. My monthly distributions changed to consulting payments during the pandemic. Vanessa explained that lenders preferred fixed management costs. The amount fell from an average of 36,000 Mexican pesos to 7,500. She said the balance accumulated as retained earnings. I should have objected. Instead, I looked at empty restaurant orders, workers spaced between machines, and the fear in everyone's faces. If my smaller payment kept one person employed, I could endure it. That was the story I told myself. I never verified whether the sacrifice helped anyone. In 2021, after my wrist fracture, Clara brought documents to my house. She wore a mask and placed colored tabs beside signature lines. One document authorized temporary remote banking. Another acknowledged revised consulting terms. I signed 5 pages at the kitchen table with my hand aching inside the cast. The forged transfer supposedly occurred during that same period. Vanessa understood that a true cluster of paperwork could hide a false page in later explanations. She did not need me to remember signing it. She needed other people to believe I might have forgotten. The following year, I visited the warehouse without notice. My founder badge still worked then. I found the juki pushed behind maintenance supplies, its table covered with boxes of disposable masks. I cleared the boxes and wiped dust from the handwheel. Vanessa found me there. "This is what I mean about emotional interference," she said. "It is equipment. It is an altar. Every time employees see you touching it, they think old methods outrank current management." "Do old records outrank current management?" Her face changed for only a second. "Records support management. They do not control it." I should have remembered that answer. Instead, I apologized for arriving unannounced. By 2024, my name disappeared from vendor introductions. Vanessa described me as retired. When I corrected her at one meeting, she laughed and said, "Retired in spirit, if not on paper." The buyers laughed too. I smiled because challenging the joke would have made everyone uncomfortable. Silence often begins as hospitality. The anniversary invitation arrived after 3 months without a distribution payment. I had called Clara twice. She said the company was reconciling tax positions before the celebration. The heavy ivory card felt like reassurance. Why invite me if Vanessa intended to erase me? Now, looking back, I understand the reception was not merely a party. It was a staged ownership narrative for clients and lenders. Vanessa wanted photographs of herself beside the company history, witnesses to my diminished role, and a public scene in which my denial could be labeled confusion. The machine disposal was both cruelty and cleanup. If the Juki vanished, its serial number, hidden documents, and origin story vanished with it. If I protested emotionally, I would help Vanessa portray me as an old woman attached to obsolete metal. That morning, however, I knew none of this. I stood in my cream-tiled kitchen fastening the cuff of my navy dress, still arranging excuses for a woman who had once brought us the largest order of our lives. Trust did not make me foolish. Trust without verification made me vulnerable. There is a difference, and I would spend the next months learning it. Before leaving the house, I opened the small tin where I kept spare buttons. Beneath pearl shirt buttons and black trouser buttons lay the brass thimble Daniel bought at a market in Saltillo. It was too large for my finger and had never been useful, but he claimed every seamstress deserved one beautiful tool that performed no service at all. I slipped it into my handbag beside the invitation. The gesture embarrassed me even in private. I was not a woman who carried charms. Still, grief makes rituals from ordinary objects, and that morning I wanted the weight of something he had chosen. I checked the stove twice, watered the basil plant above the sink, and left 300 Mexican pesos beneath the sugar bowl for the young neighbor who bought groceries on Saturdays. These details mattered because humiliation never arrives in a life emptied for its convenience. It interrupts errands, bills, plants, and promises. While Vanessa prepared lights, speeches, and a forged document, I worried whether the basil would survive the heat and whether my left shoe would rub my heel. At the front gate, I noticed a loose thread near the dress hem. I could have cut it, but I returned for my sewing scissors and secured it properly. Daniel used to say that a loose thread is a question. Pull without looking, and you may open more than you intend. I smiled at the memory, locked the door, and walked toward Lucia's car without understanding how precisely that lesson would soon apply. The street was already noisy with delivery motorcycles and a vendor calling out the price of oranges. Mrs. Ortega swept dust from her doorway and admired my dress. I told her the company was honoring 25 years, and she said Daniel would have been proud to see my name above a warehouse. I thanked her without explaining that I had not seen my name honored on the invitation. For the length of one quiet block, I allowed myself to imagine a different reception. Vanessa placing the old ledger in my hands, workers remembering Daniel, and the Juki polished beneath warm lights. Hope can be evidence of goodness, but it can also delay recognition. I carried both possibilities into Lucia's car. I did not yet know that the honest version of that celebration would come only after the false one collapsed under its own records. Daniel and I had bought the first industrial machine in 1987 for 428,000 old pesos, the equivalent of 428 Mexican pesos after the currency change, though it had represented nearly 4 months of our income then. It was a green Juki DDL 555 with a black oil pan and a motor that hummed lower than the domestic singer my mother had given me. We kept it in the back room, where I sewed school uniforms after our children slept. Daniel cut fabric on a plywood door balanced across 2 sawhorses. The room smelled of chalk, hot cotton, and the cinnamon tea he made at 2 in the morning when my fingers cramped. That machine paid for Lucia's nursing entrance exam. It paid 6,400 Mexican pesos toward our son Aaron's dental surgery when he was 9. During the 1994 crisis, it paid the mortgage 1 stack of restaurant aprons at a time. By the time Vanessa joined me in 2001, I had 6 employees, 2 cutting tables, and an order ledger wrapped in a grocery bag whenever rain leaked through the roof. Vanessa was 34 then, sharp-eyed and fearless with buyers. She could walk into a hotel office carrying 1 sample chef's coat and leave with an order for 800. I trusted her because she seemed to admire the work. She said the Juki was the heartbeat of the company. She once polished its metal plate herself before a newspaper photographer arrived. After Daniel died, Vanessa took over most daily operations. I retained 52% of the partnership, or so every original document said, but grief made paperwork feel like a language spoken underwater. I signed routine approvals, attended quarterly meetings, and accepted reduced distributions while Vanessa expanded into the Apodaca warehouse. She told me cash had to remain in the business. I lived on my IMSS widow's pension, occasional alterations, and 7,500 Mexican pesos monthly consulting payments that arrived later each season. At 11 that morning, Lucia pulled up in her silver Nissan March. She wore pale blue scrubs beneath a cardigan because she had traded shifts to drive me. Her hair was tied in the impatient knot she used at the end of 12-hour hospital nights. "You should let me come inside with you," she said while I fastened my seatbelt. "It is a company reception, not a tribunal." "Then why did they tell you there was no guest allocation?" I folded the invitation into my handbag. The leather was soft and cracked at the corners, a gift from Daniel on our 30th anniversary. "Because caterers count plates, sweetheart. Do not make it larger than it is." Lucia looked at me the way nurses look at patients who claim their pain is a 2 when their hands are shaking. "Vanessa has not answered your calls for 3 weeks. She sent the invitation. Her assistant sent it." Traffic thickened near Miguel Alemán Avenue. Delivery trucks threw gray dust against the windshield, and the mountains beyond the industrial roofs looked cut from faded blue paper. I watched mechanics eating tacos beside a tire shop and remembered Daniel taking me along that road before sunrise, the Juki tied upright in the bed of his brother's pickup. He had wrapped its head in our wedding blanket to keep the dew off. At the warehouse, a white tent covered the visitor parking area. Valets in black shirts waved newer vehicles toward the glass entrance. A brass-colored sign read Mercer Rourke, 25 years of building trust. My surname was 12 inches high, yet the young attendant checked his tablet twice and pointed Lucia toward the street. "Ms. Mercer's access is through receiving," he said. "Receiving?" Lucia repeated. He kept his eyes on the tablet. "The loading bay on the east side. Executive instruction." Heat rose from the pavement in wavering sheets. The east side smelled of diesel, wet cardboard, and the sour water collected near a blocked drain. Forklifts beeped behind a chain barrier. I stepped out carefully so my low heels would not catch in the broken asphalt. Lucia lowered her window. "Mom, get back in. I helped pay for this building." "That is exactly why you should not enter beside the garbage compactor. Pride is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet hand closing a car door, because turning back would feel like accepting the insult." I told Lucia I would call after the speeches. She waited until a security guard opened the personnel gate, and I could feel her watching me cross the yellow safety lines. Inside, the loading corridor was cool enough to raise bumps on my arms. Racks of finished uniforms stood in clear plastic. I recognized the navy piping on a hospital jacket and reached to feel the seam. The stitching was uneven near the pocket, for millimeters where our standard allowed 2. Daniel would have unpicked it without speaking. Rafael Dominguez Pena came around a pallet carrying a clipboard. He had supervised production for 17 years and still wore the brown leather belt his wife gave him when their first grandchild was born. His face changed when he saw me. "Dona Evelyn, they told us you were not coming until afternoon." Apparently, I came through the wrong century as well as the wrong door. He did not laugh. His gaze went toward the ceiling camera, then to the old Juki standing on a wheeled platform near the maintenance cage. Someone had cleaned it. The green enamel was chipped, and the table bore pale rings from coffee cups, but the machine's silver tension discs caught the fluorescent light. "Why is she out here?" I asked. Raphael gripped the clipboard. "Vanessa said it would be part of a display." He moved toward the machine as if checking the casters. Instead, he took his phone from his shirt pocket, bent beside the base, and photographed the brass serial plate. The motion was quick enough that I might have missed it if I had not spent 40 years watching hands. "Raphael, please go to the reception, Dona Evelyn." His voice was barely above the refrigeration fans. "And if anyone gives you a paper, do not sign it." Before I could ask why, Vanessa's assistant appeared at the corridor door. She held a roll of adhesive labels and smiled with only the professional portion of her face. "Ms. Mercer," she said, "we have been looking everywhere for you." What I did not know then was that Raphael had not photographed the plate for nostalgia. By sunset, Vanessa planned to erase every Founder-era asset number from the warehouse, and that small rectangle of brass would become the first piece of evidence she failed to destroy. Vanessa's assistant led me from the loading corridor into a narrow staff passage that opened behind the reception stage. Music and conversation pushed through the door each time a server passed. I could smell citrus perfume, grilled beef, and the sweet artificial vanilla used in hotel pastries. A rack held white jackets embroidered with the new anniversary logo, but none bore the three-stitch mark Daniel and I had once required inside the collar. "Your credential," the assistant said. I opened my handbag and gave her the founder badge I had worn at annual meetings since 2004. It was brushed aluminum, with my photograph beneath the words Evelyn Mercer, co-founder. Daniel had teased me about the photograph because the flash made me look startled. The assistant turned the badge over, placed it in a plastic envelope, and sealed it. "Why are you doing that?" "Credential system update." She wrote Evelyn in blue marker on a white visitor sticker. The ink squeaked against the coated paper. Then she pressed it onto my navy dress, directly over the place where the badge had rested. For a moment, I could not breathe properly. The sticker's cheap adhesive tugged at the fabric. Through the doorway, I saw employees wearing silver founder anniversary pins, including people hired less than 6 months earlier. "I am not a visitor," I said. Ms. Rourke asked that all inactive personnel use temporary identification. "I own 52% of this company." The assistant lowered her eyes. "You will need to discuss ownership questions with legal." She opened the door before I could answer. Applause rolled across the warehouse showroom. Round tables stood beneath hanging lights, and the concrete floor had been polished until it reflected the blue centerpieces. A display wall showed photographs of Vanessa shaking hands with buyers, cutting ribbons, and standing beside boxes of donated uniforms. In one photograph, my shoulder remained at the far edge, cropped just beyond my face. Vanessa stood near the stage in an ivory suit that probably cost more than my yearly consulting payments. Her gold watch flashed when she raised a crystal glass. She saw the visitor sticker immediately. Her mouth made the smallest satisfied curve. "Evelyn," she said into the microphone, "our very first seamstress has arrived." People turned. Some applauded because they believed it was praise. Others knew better and stared at their plates. "Co-founder," Raphael said from somewhere behind me. Vanessa continued as if she had not heard. "Every modern company begins with humble tools and humble people. Today we celebrate how far professional management can carry a small workshop." A server offered sparkling wine from a tray. When I reached, Vanessa touched his elbow. "Not for her," she said. "Evelyn takes medication." I did not. The server returned moments later with water in a dented paper cup, the kind kept near the production floor cooler. A brown crease ran down one side. Vanessa clicked her crystal glass against it so lightly that only I heard. "We cannot confuse charity with partnership," she murmured. My hand tightened around the cup. Cold water seeped through the paper and dampened my fingers. I thought of the nights Daniel and I split one bottle of apple soda among 4 people because every spare peso had gone toward payroll. Charity, Vanessa called it, as though I had wandered in from the road asking to be fed. The anniversary video began. It showed a dramatized workshop with a young actress using a bright domestic sewing machine. Vanessa narrated the company's history, placing herself at its beginning. The year 1987 appeared on the screen beside her name, though she had been 21 and living in Saltillo then. My photograph did not appear once. After the video, 2 workers rolled the old Juki onto the open floor. The motor cable dragged behind it. I stepped forward without thinking. "There she is," I said. "You cleaned her." Vanessa handed her glass to an assistant. "We are clearing obsolete equipment today. The display is symbolic." "Symbolic of what?" "Progress." She turned to the clients. "This machine has no compliant guard, no digital stitch regulator, and no asset value. It is sentimental junk occupying insured space." "It is my property," I said. The room quieted in layers. Forklifts continued beeping beyond the partition. Vanessa picked up a folder from the podium. "Actually, Evelyn, you transferred all partnership interests and associated equipment to me on September 14, 2021. You received 84,000 Mexican pesos in full settlement." She removed a document and held it where the front tables could see. My name appeared at the bottom in blue ink. The signature bent upward at the final R exactly as mine usually did. I felt something colder than fear. I never signed that. The transfer was witnessed and notarized. Not by me. Vanessa nodded toward the security manager, a broad man with a radio clipped high on his chest. This is why family founders should retire before memory becomes a liability. The words struck harder than shouting would have. Two buyers looked away. A young machinist covered her mouth. Raphael moved toward us, but another supervisor blocked him. Vanessa raised one finger. Outside, a forklift lifted the platform carrying the Juki. Its wheels trembled over the threshold. I followed until the security manager caught my forearm, not violently, but firmly enough that his thumb left a pale oval in my skin. "Do not touch me," I said. "Please cooperate, ma'am." The forklift crossed the yard toward an open scrap container. Wind lifted a corner of cardboard inside it. The machine looked smaller beneath the afternoon sky, its threads stand shaking with each bump. "Stop that machine," I called. Vanessa came to stand beside me. "Which one?" The forklift tilted. My Juki slid forward. Its wooden table struck the steel edge, cracked near the belt opening, and vanished into the container. The metal head landed with the sound that had opened this story. Memory can be cruelly precise. I saw Lucia at 6 asleep beneath the cutting table while I finished 42 blouses. I saw Aaron's dental receipt pinned beneath the oil bottle. I saw Daniel guiding my hand toward a hidden drawer in the machine base during the 2008 recession and saying, "Some things should stay where only work will find them." I had forgotten that sentence for 18 years. "That is where dead weight belongs," Vanessa said. Then she held out the transfer agreement. "You may leave quietly, or I can have counsel pursue repayment of benefits you accepted after your sale. This signature is not mine. It passed a notary. Paper passes through many hands. Truth does not change in any of them." My voice shook, but I was glad I said it. Vanessa's face hardened. She instructed security to escort me out through receiving, the same route by which I had entered. At the loading gate, the assistant peeled the visitor sticker from my dress. It lifted a thread from the weave and left a gray rectangle of adhesive. She did not return my founder badge. Lucia was already waiting beside the curb. Raphael must have called her, though I would not learn that until later. She ran toward me, and the anger in her face changed to alarm when she saw my empty hands. "Where is the machine?" I could not answer. Diesel smoke drifted across the gate. Behind us, guests applauded the cutting of an anniversary cake. Lucia helped me into the car. On the seat lay a white envelope that had not been there before. Inside was a photocopy of the transfer agreement and a business card for Dr. Adriana Salazar Vega, Forensic Document Examiner, Professional License 447-9218. Across the card someone had written in block letters, "She already knows the signature is forged." My daughter read it twice. Who left this? I looked back at the warehouse. Raphael stood behind the chain gate, one hand resting on the brown belt his wife had given him. He shook his head once. The message had not come from him. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table wearing the navy dress with the damaged thread still rising from the chest. Lucia warmed chicken soup, but the smell of cumin turned my stomach. She placed the forged transfer beneath the yellow light and took photographs of every page. "You need a lawyer tonight," she said. "Lawyers cost money. So did nursing school, and you found it." There was no accusation in her tone, which made the guilt sharper. I had sown through fevers, tendon pain, and Daniel's chemotherapy bills to give my children choices. Now Lucia was standing in my kitchen offering me the steadiness I had once offered her. I touched the copied signature. It looked right from a distance. Up close, the line was too smooth. My real signature always carried a tiny pause between Evelyn and Mercer because arthritis had stiffened my index finger after 2017. This one flowed like a younger hand pretending to be old. "What did Dad hide in the machine?" Lucia asked. "I do not know. I remembered him mentioning a drawer." "Did you ever open it?" "Not after he died." The answer sat between us with the weight of another loss. I had let Vanessa discard more than a tool. I had let grief turn portions of my own history into locked rooms. At 8:17 p.m., my phone chimed with an email from the bank. The subject line read "Final Notice. Reserve Contribution Discrepancy." I nearly deleted it as spam, but Lucia opened the attachment. It referred to the Mercer Supplemental Retirement Reserve, a company-funded account. "Daniel, and I had established for ourselves and long-serving workers. The notice stated that required deposits totaling 326,400 Mexican pesos had not been received over 14 months. Vanessa had told me those deposits were automatic. Lucia called the number on the statement. After identity questions, the representative confirmed that my reserve balance had been transferred in 3 installments to an account ending in 7712. The authorization bore the same date as the alleged partnership sale. How much? I asked. Lucia covered the phone. 984,600 pesos. The refrigerator motor clicked off. In the sudden quiet, I heard rain beginning against the metal awning outside. Daniel had installed that awning himself, leaving one screw slightly crooked because his ladder shifted. I fixed my eyes on it through the window. Call the number on the card, I said. Dr. Adriana Salazar answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was low, measured, and awake in the way of someone who expected important calls after business hours. Mrs. Mercer, I hoped you would contact me. How do you know my name? At 3:42 this afternoon, an anonymous source sent me a high-resolution scan of your alleged transfer agreement and 6 known samples of your signature. The source asked whether the questioned signature showed mechanical reproduction. Does it? I will not issue a conclusion without examining originals. But I can tell you 3 observable facts. The pressure is uniform where natural writing should vary. The final flourish repeats a microscopic ink skip found in one of your 2016 tax forms. And the ink crosses a laser-printed toner ridge in a sequence inconsistent with the date stated on the document. Lucia put the call on speaker and began taking notes. Adriana continued. In plain English, someone appears to have copied a real signature, transferred its movement mechanically, and placed it on a document that may have been printed later than claimed. Vanessa says a notary witnessed it. A seal proves that a seal was applied. It does not prove the truth of the event. There was no drama in Adriana's statement, only discipline. That steadiness held me more securely than comfort would have. We agreed to meet the next morning at her office in Monterrey. She instructed me to bring original documents spanning at least 10 years, especially anything signed before and after my arthritis diagnosis. She also told me not to confront Vanessa, not to access company systems, and not to post accusations online. Evidence is most useful before the other side knows exactly what you possess, she said. After the call, Lucia opened a storage cabinet where I kept tax folders in reused cereal boxes. We found mortgage papers, school enrollment forms, insurance claims, and Daniel's death certificate. Each document carried an earlier version of my hand. Near midnight, Lucia discovered a 2021 Christmas card I had signed while wearing a wrist brace. The signature had the same unusual angle as the forged transfer, but not the same rhythm. She placed both pages beneath a magnifying lamp from my sewing room. Mom, she said, look at the dot in the E. The forged signature contained a tiny blue hook inside the second E of Mercer. The same hook appeared on a 2016 tax authorization. Even the accidental shape had been repeated. I thought of Vanessa holding the paper before clients, inviting them to treat my certainty as confusion. I had spent the afternoon ashamed of my age. Now I understood that my age was not her evidence. It was her strategy. At 2 a.m, sleep still would not come. I stood in the back room where the Juki had once lived. A pale rectangle remained on the floor beneath the replacement table. On the wall hung Daniel's measuring tape, yellowed and stiff at the first 6 inches. I pressed it to my palm. You told me work would find it, I whispered. Rainwater traveled through the gutter with a hollow rushing sound. Somewhere in Apodaca, my machine lay beneath broken pallets unless the recycler had already taken it away. Somewhere else, an unknown person had risked a job or worse to send Adriana that scan. What none of us knew that night was that the missing pension money was only the smallest account Vanessa had touched. The forged signature had not been created merely to remove me from a company. It had been created to make property worth 18,700,000 Mexican pesos appear available for a loan, and 16 workers' retirement accounts had been used to keep the fraud alive. Adriana's office occupied the 2nd floor of a converted house near the courthouse district. The waiting room smelled of paper, coffee, and the lemon polish used on an old walnut cabinet. Framed certificates covered one wall without crowding it. There were no dramatic crime photographs, only enlarged handwriting samples showing loops, pressure points, and tremors. Adriana herself wore a charcoal blouse, silver earrings, and glasses attached to a thin black cord. At 58, she had the composed face of a teacher who would wait as long as necessary for the correct answer. She shook my hand gently, then examined how I held the pen when I signed her evidence receipt. "Your arthritis affects initiation pressure," she said. "That matters." She never called my hand weak. She called its changes measurable. Mateo Ibarra canted joined us carrying a canvas briefcase and a paper bag of sweetbread. He was 61, broad-shouldered, and cautious enough to read the evidence receipt before taking coffee. His professional license number, 309-8741, appeared beneath his signature on the engagement letter. "I do not promise arrests," he told me. "I promise procedures. First we protect records. Then we identify the transactions. Then we ask a judge for only what the documents support. And if the documents support everything I fear, then we ask for more." Adriana placed the copy of the transfer beneath a digital microscope. On a monitor, my blue signature became a landscape of fibers and ink. She showed us places where the pen line narrowed without corresponding pressure, as if the mark had been laid down by a machine-guided path. At the final R, a white interruption appeared in precisely the same location as the 2016 tax authorization. "Natural signatures vary," she said. "Even skilled repetition contains life. This defect repeats beyond chance." She then enlarged the printed date. Toner particles sat beneath some blue ink strokes and above others, indicating that the page had been manipulated or passed through more than one printing process. A genuine document signed once should not show that contradictory sequence. Mateo asked whether she would testify. "After originals, chain of custody, and full comparison. Not before." Her caution irritated me for half a second. Then I realized caution was the opposite of what Vanessa had done to me. Vanessa had announced a conclusion and used authority to make others accept it. Adriana would build one fact at a time until authority had nowhere else to stand. We spent 4 hours cataloging my records. Authentic partnership minutes from 2004, 2009, and 2018 all listed my 52% interest. A 2019 bank mandate required both my signature and Vanessa's for transfers above 250,000 Mexican pesos. Yet the retirement reserve had moved without any alert reaching me. Mateo called the bank's fraud department and dictated a preservation notice. He also requested records for account 7712. The representative would not reveal the owner without legal process, but she confirmed something unexpected. The 84,000 Mexican pesos alleged sale payment had entered an account opened in my name 11 days before the transfer date, remained there for 48 hours, then moved to account 7712. "I never opened another account," I said. "Then someone used your identity," Mateo replied. Adriana turned away from the monitor, and for the first time I saw emotion break through her professional calm. "My mother lost her home because a forged deed went unchallenged for 22 days. By the time I proved the signature false, the property had passed through 2 buyers. We recovered damages, not the house. That is why speed matters now." She said it without asking for sympathy. The admission explained the labeled folders, the duplicate photographs, and the clock on her wall that ticked louder than any clock should. At 1:06 p.m., Rafael called from a prepaid number. He asked me to meet him at a small restaurant near the Apodaca Industrial Park. Mateo insisted on coming, and Adriana brought evidence bags. Rafael sat in the back booth with untouched enchiladas and a cap pulled low over his forehead. His hands smelled faintly of machine grease. He slid his phone across the table. The first photograph showed the Juki's brass serial plate, DDL 555-87-11492. The second showed a clipboard titled Legacy Asset Purge, dated June 12. My machine appeared as item 1. Below it were 14 cutting tools, 3 original ledgers, and a steel filing cabinet from Daniel's office. Vanessa told maintenance to remove every asset label connected to purchases before 2001, Rafael said. She said an insurance inspection was coming. But insurance asks for labels. It does not ask you to grind them off. "Where is the machine?" "I changed the disposal ticket after the forklift left the yard." The recycler who normally crushes metal did not receive it. A driver took it to a salvage depot in Salinas, Victoria. I paid him 1,600 Mexican pesos to hold the load until Monday. My knees weakened beneath the table. Lucia gripped my hand. "You saved her," I said. "Maybe." The table cracked. The head looked intact. Mateo asked why Rafael had risked his job. He rubbed the edge of his cap. "Because I watched Dona Evelyn sew the uniforms my daughters wore at technical school. Because Vanessa ordered me to lie about inventory. And because yesterday she gave me a list of 16 employee pension files to move into shredding. Mine was on it." He produced a folded sheet. 16 names appeared beside contribution numbers. Each line ended with the same bank reference, 7712. The answer to the serial plate photograph was now clear. Rafael had known the audit trail was being stripped from the building, and he wanted proof that at least one original asset had existed under my ownership. But the list created a darker question. Why were 16 worker pension accounts tied to the same destination that received my stolen reserve and the staged 84,000 Mexican pesos payment? Adriana sealed the sheet in a clear evidence sleeve. Mateo photographed Rafael handing it over, recorded the time, and asked him to sign a short declaration. The restaurant's air conditioner rattled above us. At another table, a family celebrated a child's birthday with a small chocolate cake, and the candles reflected in the window. I looked at the 16 names. I knew everyone. Rosa had worked through her husband's dialysis. Martin had delayed retirement to support 2 grandchildren. Rafael's wife needed monthly medication costing 3,280 Mexican pesos. Vanessa had not merely taken numbers from accounts. She had reached into years of aching backs, missed dinners, and hands stiffened by repetitive work. "We recover the machine first," Mateo said. "Then we go to the bank." No one contacts Vanessa. On the drive to Salinas, Victoria, dry hills rose around industrial yards and concrete plants. I sat beside Lucia in the back seat, holding Daniel's measuring tape in my handbag. The salvage depot owner led us past refrigerators, twisted fencing, and stripped vehicle frames. Metal dust coated the ground like dark flour. The Juki stood beneath a corrugated roof, covered by a gray tarp. When the tarp came away, I saw the broken table and bent thread stand. The machine head carried a fresh scrape along one side, but the hand wheel turned. A drop of old amber oil clung beneath the inspection plate. I rested my palm on the cool green enamel. It was not a person, and I knew better than to confuse an object with Daniel. Yet the surface held the shape of every ordinary day we had survived together. My fingers found a shallow nick he made while replacing the belt in 1992. "There is a drawer," I said. The standard wooden drawer beneath the table was empty except for lint. Then I remembered Daniel guiding my hand lower, toward the black oil pan. Mateo helped tilt the damaged table. Beneath the pan, secured by 2 flat screws, was a narrow metal compartment no wider than an envelope. The screws were dark with age. We did not open it there. Adriana photographed the compartment, sealed the entire machine area with tamper tape, and arranged transport to her evidence garage. As the truck doors closed, I caught Rafael wiping his eyes with the back of his wrist. He turned away before anyone could acknowledge it. Vanessa had called the machine dead weight, but it had survived her spectacle, and inside it rested something Daniel had hidden where only work would find it. Adriana's evidence garage was cleaner than most kitchens. White lights ran above a steel work table. A camera on an articulated arm recorded every movement, and a digital clock remained visible in the frame. She made each of us state our name, the date, and our reason for being present before she cut the first strip of tamper tape. The hidden compartment resisted even after Mateo removed the flat screws. Years of oil had sealed its edge. Adriana worked a plastic tool beneath the lip, millimeter by millimeter, until the metal released with a soft click. The smell that came out was not decay but old machine oil, dry paper, and the faint cedar scent of the moth blocks Daniel kept in our workshop cabinets. Inside lay a waxed canvas packet tied with red thread. Beneath it was a brass key stamped 417 and a folded purchase receipt from Maquinas Industriales del Norte, dated August 3, 1987. The receipt listed the Juki by serial number and named Evelyn and Daniel Mercer as buyers. A second document recorded the machine as the first contributed asset when our partnership was formalized in 2001. Both pages bore original ink signatures and a municipal tax stamp. I touched nothing. Adriana photographed each layer before lifting it with nitrile-gloved hands. Daniel had written on the canvas in black marker, "For Evelyn if records are ever disputed." My name in his handwriting undid me more completely than the warehouse humiliation had. His capital E leaned forward as though walking into wind. I sat on a folding chair and pressed my knuckles against my mouth while Lucia rubbed slow circles between my shoulders. "He expected trouble," she whispered. "Daniel expected rain in every season," I said. "He kept duplicate keys for locks we no longer owned." But I remembered the final year before his diagnosis, when Vanessa had begun proposing a corporate conversion that would give her voting control. Daniel distrusted the complexity of her presentations. He never accused her of dishonesty. He simply said a person should be able to explain a fair arrangement without hiding its cost in footnotes. Adriana opened the wax packet. It contained an asset ledger, partnership contribution receipts, photographs of our original workshop, and a handwritten index referring to Caja 417, Banco del Norte, Centro Branch. One photograph showed Daniel and me beside the Juki on the day the partnership was registered. I wore a sunflower print blouse and held the original ledger against my chest. Vanessa stood on my other side, smiling. "This establishes continuous ownership history," Matteo said. "It does not alone defeat the later transfer, but it makes the disposal look less like housekeeping and more like evidence destruction." Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? I had asked myself that question from the moment the machine fell. Part of me wanted to drive back to Apodaca, place the receipt under Vanessa's face, and demand that every person who watched my humiliation watch her answer. But evidence, Adriana reminded me, was not a weapon to swing in anger. It was a bridge that had to carry weight. The brass key led us to Banco del Norte the next morning. The branch manager, Elena Campos, verified that safe deposit box 417 had been rented jointly by Daniel and me on May 19, 2008. Annual fees had been drawn from an account I rarely used. Vanessa's accounting department had handled those payments until 2022, when the charge switched to my pension account without explanation. Because Daniel was dead, the bank required his death certificate, our marriage record, my identification, and a notarized survivorship declaration. Matteo had anticipated each one. At 11:34 a.m., Elena led us into a vault corridor where the air felt dry and cool against my cheeks. The key turned stiffly. Elena used a second bank key, then carried the long metal box to a private room. Its green felt table had worn pale at the corners. I remembered opening a similar box with Daniel when we bought the house, both of us laughing because the documents seemed too important for people who still counted coins for bus fare. Inside box 417 lay 3 black binders, a padded envelope, and a sealed letter addressed to me. The first binder held original partnership minutes from 2001 through 2016. Every annual statement listed my ownership at 52%, Vanessa's at 48%. The second contained property records for the Apodaca warehouse lot, identified as Lot 14B, Industrial Park Las Palmas. Daniel and I had purchased the land personally in 2007 for 3,950,000 Mexican pesos and leased it to the company under a renewable agreement. The land had never been contributed to the partnership. The third binder held payroll reserve schedules, including employee pension contributions. Each page carried Daniel's handwritten cross-check totals. A micro SD card was taped inside the cover with the words Payroll Backup 2019. Adriana opened the padded envelope only after documenting its seals. It contained original signature samples, blank company letterhead from several years, and minutes of a 2018 meeting where Vanessa proposed purchasing my interest for 7,600,000 Mexican pesos. I had declined. That single page made the alleged 84,000 Mexican pesos sale 3 years later look absurd. The letter remained. My hands shook when I broke the seal. "Evelyn," Daniel had written, "if you are reading this, either I am gone or the company has become something we no longer recognize. Do not let grief persuade you that carelessness is kindness. Vanessa is gifted, but she has begun treating control as though it were the same as stewardship. Lot 14B belongs to us, not the company. Never sign it away without independent counsel. If anyone says otherwise, compare the lease, the land registry record, and the partnership minutes. Trust work that can be counted. Trust Lucia. And remember that you built more than I did, even when I was the one people thanked. The final sentence blurred. I read it again through tears and heard his voice with painful clarity, the soft rasp left by chemotherapy, the way he paused before saying something he wanted me to keep. Matteo looked away to give me privacy. Adriana closed the binders. Lucia placed her forehead against mine. For 8 years, I had believed honoring Daniel meant preserving peace around the company he loved. His letter told me peace had never been the assignment. Stewardship was. We left the bank separately. Matteo took certified copies to the land registry. Adriana carried the signature samples in locked transport cases. Lucia drove me home with the radio off. At a traffic light, she said, "Dad knew you would need me. He knew I would refuse to need anyone." That too. By evening, the microSD card had been imaged without altering the original. It contained encrypted payroll backups, but Daniel's ledger included the password, the date of our first uniform order, and the number of pieces, 1203198742. The file showed that through December 2019, every pension contribution had been paid correctly. Matteo obtained preliminary bank records for account 7712 under an emergency fraud inquiry. The account belonged to VR Strategic Consulting, a company controlled by Vanessa's cousin, Hector Rourke. From January 2021 through May 2026, Mercer Rourke had sent it monthly consulting fees ranging from 31,800 to 68,500 Mexican pesos. On the same days, employee pension contributions fell short by nearly identical amounts. The first verified loss totaled 2,460,000 Mexican pesos, excluding my reserve. The pattern was not sloppy. Contributions were reduced just enough each month to delay automatic alerts. Small replacement deposits were made before quarterly reports, creating the appearance of timing errors. "This is the money layer," Matteo said during a meeting at my kitchen table. He spread the transaction chart beside the sugar bowl. "It is serious, but it is not why she needed your ownership transfer. She could steal operating money without pretending to own your shares." I unfolded Daniel's letter again. One phrase had been underlined twice. Lot 14B belongs to us. What had Vanessa done with land she did not own? The answer arrived the following afternoon in a registry extract bearing the stamp of Nuevo Leon's Public Registry of Property. Lot 14B had been pledged as collateral for an 18,700,000 Mexican pesos commercial loan. The borrower was Mercer Rourke Workwear. The guarantor was listed as Vanessa Rourke, sole shareholder and legal owner. Attached to the collateral filing was a copy of my forged transfer. The safe deposit box had preserved what Vanessa believed grief had erased: my controlling interest, our personal title to the land, and the paper trail of honest payroll contributions. But Daniel's warning created a new open wound. The loan had been funded 9 months earlier. Where had 18,700,000 Mexican pesos gone? And what would happen to the warehouse if the lender discovered the collateral was false? We began with the 16 pension accounts because people could not wait for a perfect case while retirement money disappeared. Matteo arranged a Saturday meeting in the back room of a community center in San Nicolas. We used no company email and asked workers to bring original afore statements, pay slips, and identification. Rosa Trevino arrived first, carrying documents in a plastic grocery bag. She was 62 and had hemmed more than 80,000 hospital trousers during her career. Her statement showed employer contributions missing for 11 months, though every pay slip listed the deductions. Martin Pacheco's shortfall was 74,220 Mexican pesos. Rafael's was 91,680 Mexican pesos. Across 16 workers, the unpaid or diverted amount reached 1,475,300 Mexican pesos before interest and penalties. Each number came with a life attached. Rosa had postponed replacing 2 molars because she expected to retire in 18 months. Martin's grandson needed speech therapy twice a week. A cutter named Benjamin had taken weekend security shifts because his balance no longer matched the estimate his A4 advisor gave him. I listened until shame rose in my throat. I should have checked. Rosa placed her rough hand over mine. A pale scar crossed her thumb from a rotary blade accident in 2010. You trusted the statements they gave you. So did we. The thief is the person who stole, not the person who believed the report. Adriana collected signature samples from 5 workers whose authorization forms appeared in company files. Every question form displayed the same suspicious smoothness as mine. Some signatures had been enlarged or compressed to fit designated boxes, leaving digital artifacts along the edges. One woman supposedly signed a waiver on March 8th while hospitalized for gallbladder surgery. Her hospital admission bracelet and surgical record proved she had not been at the warehouse. At noon, a young woman entered through the rear door wearing a baseball cap and carrying a laptop sleeve. I recognized her as Sophia Leal, a junior accountant who had once called me about an invoice discrepancy. I sent the scan, she said before sitting down. I sent it to Dr. Salazar. Her hands trembled so badly that Lucia poured water for her. Sophia explained that Vanessa had instructed her to search archived tax files for a signature with a long final flourish. The request came through an internal message on May 26, 2021. Later, Sophia saw Vanessa's outside consultant using graphic design software to isolate my signature from the 2016 authorization. I told myself it was for a presentation, Sophia said. Then the transfer appeared in the lender package. She had saved screenshots on a personal drive, along with an email from Vanessa stating, "Make the transfer look settled before the pension reserve movement." Evelyn never checks online banking. Mateo asked why she waited. My father had a stroke. Vanessa advanced me 60,000 Mexican pesos for rehabilitation and made me sign a repayment agreement tied to my employment. Every time I thought about reporting her, she reminded me the full balance was due if I resigned. Debt does not legalize coercion, Mateo said. Sophia looked at me. I am sorry. I remembered how many times I had apologized to Vanessa for asking simple questions about delayed distributions. Fear shrinks language until sorry is the only word left. Help us make the record complete, I said. That will mean more than an apology. Her files revealed the mechanism. VR Strategic Consulting invoiced for market analysis that had never occurred. Vanessa approved the invoices alone, then covered cash shortages by diverting pension contributions. When auditors requested reserve confirmations, Sophia was ordered to produce altered spreadsheets. The dormant account opened in my name had been created using a scanned voter identification card from company records and a utility bill Vanessa's assistant obtained from my consulting file. The money trail was ugly but understandable. The ownership fraud was larger. Sophia showed us a confidential tender folder labeled Northeast Care Network, deadline June 30th. The contract value was 31,200,000 Mexican pesos over 3 years for hospital uniforms. To qualify, Mercer Rourke had to certify unencumbered control of its production facility and demonstrate that no minority owner could challenge the pledge of assets. Vanessa needed to appear as sole owner before the tender review. My 52% interest and personal title to Lot 14B made that impossible. She has been using the diverted money to service the loan until the tender is awarded, Sophia said. If she wins, she plans to refinance everything. If she loses, the lender may seize the warehouse. A warehouse it does not legally own, Lucia said. Sophia nodded. There is more. Vanessa ordered the old ledgers moved behind a false partition in her office. She plans to shred them next Thursday after the client inspection. The deadline was 6 days away. Adriana examined the notarial section of my alleged transfer. The embossed seal identified Notary Office 77 and Licenciado Arturo Vela Montemayor, professional license 218-6409. But Arturo Vela had died on February 2, 2021, 7 months before the documents stated execution. Could the office have used his seal afterward? I asked. Lawfully, no, Mateo said. His protocol should have been closed and transferred under supervision. The signature attributed to him appeared genuine at first glance. Under magnification, Adriana found a pattern of toner dots beneath the blue line. It was a color reproduction, not wet ink. The embossed seal, however, was real enough to leave compressed fibers. Someone had supplied Vanessa with access to a genuine seal impression or plate. Mateo filed preservation notices with the bank, a for administrators, notary archive, and company internet provider. He submitted complaints to the pension authorities and requested that no original Mercer Rourke records be destroyed. A notice is not a locked door, he warned us. It tells honest custodians to preserve evidence. It does not stop a dishonest executive from feeding paper into a shredder. Raphael continued reporting from inside the warehouse. At 11:20 p.m. Sunday, he photographed 3 trucks loading premium fabric rolls without outbound invoices. The inventory, worth approximately 1,860,000 Mexican pesos, went to a storage facility rented by VR Strategic Consulting. Vanessa was moving assets beyond the lender and the workers alike. On Monday morning, Adriana received archived print logs from a service contractor. The transfer agreement had been printed on September 2, 2022, almost a year after its stated signing date. The printer serial number matched a machine in Vanessa's executive office. A second print job on the same date contained blank retirement transfer forms for 16 employees. The forged documents were not separate conveniences. They were one production run. That afternoon, Mateo spread the case across a conference table: signature comparisons, print logs, bank transfers, pension statements, title records, the original machine receipt, and Daniel's letter. "We can prove money diversion and probable forgery," he said. "For an emergency access order, we also need immediate risk of destruction and a clear property right. Lot 14B gives us the property right. Sophia's shredding schedule gives us risk. But judges distrust family business disputes dressed as emergencies. We need corroboration from outside the family." Raphael could corroborate the destruction plan, but exposing him too soon might cost access to the building. Sophia had already resigned that morning under Mateo's protection. We needed someone connected to the false notarization or the collateral loan. Adriana traced the seal impression to a training sample filed with the State Archive in 2018. Only 4 employees at Notary Office 77 had handled the sample book. One was a former assistant named Bruno Garzateles, dismissed in 2022 for unauthorized after-hours access. We found Bruno selling insurance from a small office in Escobedo. He refused to speak at first. Then Adriana placed 2 enlarged seal impressions side by side. A tiny crescent-shaped defect appeared at the lower edge of both. "This impression came from the training plate," she said, "not from the active protocol seal. You were custodian of that plate." Bruno's face lost color. He closed the office blinds and asked whether Vanessa had sent us. "A woman named Clara Mendez paid me 45,000 Mexican pesos for 3 impressions and scans of old signature pages," he said. "She told me it was for a film prop company." Clara Mendez was Vanessa's executive assistant, the woman who had taken my founder badge. Bruno still had the bank deposit record and messages arranging the exchange. He also remembered the date, August 29, 2022, 4 days before the executive office printer produced my transfer agreement. The chain was tightening, but Vanessa felt it. That evening, Lucia received a call from the hospital procurement director asking her to attend a private meeting regarding a potential conflict of interest. Vanessa had approached the hospital with a claim that Lucia was using confidential family information to sabotage a vendor. "She is bringing my job into it," Lucia said. "Then you do not go alone," Mateo replied. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday at a cafe near the hospital. Nuevo Leon law allowed Lucia to record a conversation in which she participated, but Mateo insisted she disclose nothing, make no threats, and ask simple questions. Her phone would remain in her handbag, backed up to encrypted storage. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes late in a black SUV. She wore the same gold watch from the anniversary reception. Through the cafe window, I watched from Mateo's parked car across the street while Adriana sat beside me taking notes. For 43 minutes, Vanessa leaned toward my daughter and spoke with the patient expression she used when insulting someone politely. When Lucia emerged, her face was pale, but her steps were steady. The recording captured cups clinking, espresso steam, and Vanessa's voice with remarkable clarity. "Your mother already sold," she said. The paperwork only had to look older because the tender committee dislikes recent ownership changes. Lucia asked, "Are you saying she did not sign it in 2021? Vanessa paused for 4 seconds. "I am saying dates serve transactions. Do not confuse technical imperfections with theft." Then came the offer. If Lucia persuaded me to withdraw complaints and sign a confirmation deed, Vanessa would pay 1,200,000 Mexican pesos toward Lucia's mortgage and ensure the hospital retained its preferred vendor rebate. If she refused, Vanessa would allege procurement misconduct and seek repayment of every consulting payment I had received since 2021. "You threw away the machine that paid for my education," Lucia said on the recording. "I removed a prop your mother used to hold the company emotionally hostage." The admission was not complete, but it placed Vanessa inside the reason for backdating the transfer and established coercion. More importantly, she said the tender committee would inspect the warehouse Thursday at 2 p.m. and the old paper problem would be gone by noon. We had less than 40 hours. Before we could ask a judge to enter the warehouse, we had to make certain that our own evidence would survive the questions Vanessa's lawyers were certain to ask. Mateo divided the remaining hours into blocks on a whiteboard. Land title, signature foundation, pension witnesses, destruction risk, coercion recording, financial trace. Each heading had a name beside it and a deadline written in red. "A true fact can still become useless if no one can establish where it came from," he said. "We are going to know the parent of every page." I had always thought of paperwork as the part of business that interrupted work. Daniel had not. He numbered invoices, kept carbon copies, and wrote delivery dates on the backs of photographs. In the years after his death, I teased his habits as though they were charming excesses. Now his discipline stood between us and dispossession. Lucia and I returned to my house to search for the original lease payment records. The afternoon heat had settled inside the rooms. My small sewing fan pushed warm air across the table and made the corner of Daniel's letter flutter beneath its archival sleeve. We opened cabinets I had avoided for years. One contained his work shirts, still arranged from light blue to dark. The cotton no longer carried his scent, only cedar and the dry mineral smell of closed drawers. I had kept them because giving them away felt like accepting that no ordinary Tuesday would ever require them again. In the pocket of a gray shirt, Lucia found a folded hardware receipt dated April 18, 2016. On the reverse, Daniel had written, "Lease renewal delivered to Vanessa, 2 originals, 1 bank copy. Box under blue tiles." "What blue tiles?" Lucia asked. The phrase stirred a memory of our kitchen renovation. We had saved 6 and used blue ceramic tiles behind the pantry in case one cracked. Daniel disliked empty spaces and had built a shallow storage ledge beneath them. We moved sacks of rice and a rusted tortilla press from the bottom shelf. The tiles rested behind a removable wood strip. Beneath them lay a flat metal cash box, sealed in a freezer bag. Its small key was taped under the pantry lip. Inside were rent receipts from Mercer Rourke to Daniel and me for Lot 14B. The monthly payment began at 42,000 Mexican pesos in 2008 and rose to 86,500 Mexican pesos by 2021. Vanessa had signed 12 annual acknowledgments stating that the company occupied the property as tenant and acquired no ownership interest. The payments stopped 3 months before the alleged transfer. Lucia sat on the kitchen floor with a receipt in her hand. "You never noticed 86,000 pesos stopped coming?" The question sounded cruel only because it was fair. "Vanessa told me the rent was being retained against capital expenses," I said. "She showed me a roof repair estimate and said the company could not pay both." "Did you approve that?" "I told her to do what protected payroll." "Mom, that is not the same as signing away rent." "I know that now." She looked down. I saw her fighting the temptation to ask why I had not trusted her sooner. The answer was not noble. After Daniel died, I wanted my children to believe I remained capable. Every unopened statement became proof I could manage alone, even as those papers accumulated beyond my control. "I was ashamed," I said. "Not of being cheated. I was ashamed that I did not understand the reports." Vanessa used words I had never needed when I was sewing. Debt service coverage, beneficial control, recapitalization. I signed meeting acknowledgments because asking twice made her impatient. Lucia placed the receipt in the evidence folder. You taught me to ask a surgeon to explain a procedure until I could explain it back. I did not follow my own lesson. Then follow it now. We worked until the light outside turned amber. From another box, we recovered property tax payments made from my joint account, insurance declarations naming Daniel and me as lessors, and photographs of the warehouse construction. In one, Daniel stood ankle-deep in mud holding a wooden stake marked 14B. Vanessa was visible behind him pointing toward the future loading bay. The photograph had been developed at a pharmacy. Its date stamp was November 2007. On the back, Daniel had written 5,400 square meters. Ours. Never company collateral without Evelyn. Mateo sent a courier for the documents. Before leaving, the courier photographed each item where we found it and recorded its condition. I watched him seal Daniel's old cash box and felt the peculiar ache of private history becoming public evidence. At the same time, Adriana was building what she called the natural signature range. 100 examples were not enough unless she could establish their dates and circumstances. She requested originals from the bank, IMSS, Infonavit, the tax authority, and Lucia's school archive. Every institution had a different process. The nursing school produced an enrollment guarantee I signed in 2005 when Lucia could not qualify for aid alone. My signature was fast and upright because I had signed standing at a counter while Daniel parked illegally outside. The hospital produced a 2021 consent form signed with my left hand after the wrist fracture. The bank produced checks with pressure marks visible on the reverse. Adriana charted the changes. Before arthritis, my capital E began with a high loop. After 2017, it began lower and showed a slight hesitation. After the wrist fracture, the final R shortened for 4 months. The forged transfer combined the long pre-arthritis flourish from 2016 with the shortened post-fracture ending from 2021. It was not merely copied. It was assembled from incompatible periods. The forger selected features that looked distinctive without understanding why they existed, she explained. They created a signature your hand never produced at any one point in time. That finding did something unexpected to me. Vanessa had treated my aging hand as a weakness to exploit, yet the history written into that hand betrayed her. Injury, labor, and time had made their own record. Rosa and Martin came to Adriana's office separately, so their accounts could not be attacked as coordinated. Rosa brought a biscuit tin filled with pay slips organized by year. She had circled each pension deduction in green ink. Martin brought text messages from payroll assuring him the missing deposits were a software delay. One message from Clara read, "Older employees often misunderstand statement timing. Please do not create unnecessary alarm on the floor." Rosa read it aloud and snorted. "They stole my money and called me old in the same sentence. Efficient people." Her humor lasted only until Adriana asked what she had postponed because of the missing balance. Rosa described the dental work, then admitted she had also delayed replacing a water heater. She and her husband heated bathing water in kettles for 4 months. The detail did not increase the legal amount, but it gave the theft its proper scale. Martin's grandson waited in the lobby with colored pencils. Through the open door, I heard him struggling to pronounce the letter R while his mother practiced with him. Martin kept his eyes on the pension statement. "I told them we could pay for therapy after my retirement adjustment," he said. Then the estimate dropped. I thought I had calculated wrong. Vanessa's scheme had depended on that reflex. Honest people assumed their own mistake before another person's theft. Mateo asked each witness whether I had encouraged them to accuse Vanessa. Both said no. He asked whether they expected personal favors from me. Rosa said she expected only the money listed on her statements. Martin said he would testify even if the company closed. "We are trying to prevent that," I told him. "Then prevent it with the truth," he said. "Do not protect our jobs by hiding what happened to them." Sophia spent 6 hours with a digital forensic specialist authenticating her screenshots. The specialist extracted creation dates, device identifiers, and internal message headers. One screenshot showed Vanessa asking for the widow's cleanest old signature. Another showed Clara replying with file names from my tax folder. Sophia had also retained a voice memo she recorded for herself after a meeting in 2022. In it, she described Vanessa placing a printed transfer on the desk and asking whether 84,000 Mexican pesos looked believable for an old machine and a tired name. Sophia's younger voice sounded frightened and uncertain. She had never intended the memo as evidence. She had recorded it because she feared being made to doubt her memory. That is what she did to everyone, Sophia said. She changed one label at a time. Theft became adjustment. A forged page became a corrected record. A threat became performance management. Mateo did not include the memo in the emergency petition because contemporaneous self-notes carried less weight than direct files. He preserved it for later corroboration. His restraint frustrated Sophia. "It is true," she said. "I believe you," he replied. "The court must know not only that it is true, but what legal purpose it serves today. We cannot bury the strongest evidence beneath everything that hurts." Across town, a registry archivist named Teresa Buentello retrieved the original 2007 land file from climate-controlled storage. The deed paper carried embedded fibers and a numbered revenue stamp. Teresa compared it with the electronic registry and certified that no lawful transfer from Daniel or me had ever been recorded. The collateral filing told another story. It included a corporate resolution authorizing Vanessa, as sole owner, to pledge Lot 14B. My supposed signature appeared beneath a waiver of notice. The resolution date was October 12, 2022. On that date, I had attended Aaron's wedding in Austin, Texas. Passport records, airline tickets, hotel receipts, and family photographs placed me outside Mexico for 5 days. In one photograph, I stood beneath strings of garden lights holding a bouquet. My right wrist was wrapped because the fracture still ached. Aaron joined a video call from Texas when Mateo asked for the original photographs. My son was 42, an electrician with Daniel's careful eyes and my habit of rubbing his thumb against his forefinger when worried. "Why did no one tell me sooner?" he asked. "You have your own family," I said. "So does Lucia. You told her. She was here when it happened." "Mom, distance is not the same as absence." His words landed beside Lucia's earlier anger. In protecting my children from my trouble, I had denied them the right to decide how to stand with me. Aaron uploaded the wedding album directly from the photographer's archive. Metadata confirmed the dates. He also found a short video recorded during the exact hour of the alleged corporate resolution. I was dancing with him while a mariachi trio played Daniel's favorite song. The video had no knowledge of company law. It simply made my presence in 2 countries impossible. That night, Aaron called again without the lawyers present. "Dad would have noticed the rent." "Yes. I am sorry. That sounded like blame. It sounded like truth. He would have noticed. You were taking care of him for 3 years before he died. Then you were trying to learn how to live in the same house without him. That does not make the theft your fault." I sat beside the backroom window where the Juki had once stood. A moth tapped against the screen. I keep wondering when trust became negligence. Maybe when someone decided to abuse it. We spoke for an hour about ordinary things after that. His daughter's science project, a breaker panel he was replacing, the price of flights. Ordinary conversations steadied me more than another discussion of crimes. The lender's preliminary file arrived at 9:12 p.m. through court-authorized pre-suit disclosure. Vanessa had submitted an appraisal valuing Lot 14B and the warehouse at 28,900,000 Mexican pesos. The appraiser had never entered the building. He relied on photographs and ownership documents supplied by Clara. His report assumed Mercer Rourke held clear title. The loan officer's notes recorded one concern. The company name included Mercer, but no Evelyn Mercer appeared in the ownership chart. Vanessa answered that I was her late mentor and that the surname remained as a tribute. I read the sentence 3 times. A tribute. She had turned my living ownership into a memorial she controlled. The file also contained financial projections based on the Northeast Care Network tender, even though the contract had not been awarded. Vanessa promised the lender that sole ownership would allow immediate liquidation of legacy inefficiencies, including retirement obligations exceeding market norms. Those obligations were the contributions Daniel and I had created for workers who gave us their strongest years. Maribel Cruz from the Pension Authority joined by Secure Call. She explained that employer contributions were protected funds once withheld and reported. Using them for operations was not aggressive management. It was diversion. Altering employee waivers could support separate criminal counts. Can you freeze the accounts? I asked. Not on your request alone, she said. But I can issue administrative preservation demands and coordinate with prosecutors if the forensic basis is documented. She asked whether any worker faced immediate retirement processing. Rosa did. Maribel flagged her account for manual review so the false lower balance would not become a final benefit calculation. That small administrative act prevented another irreversible step. I began to understand justice as hundreds of precise interventions, most of them invisible. A flag in a database, a certified timestamp, a phone image before it could be reset. At 10:30, Raphael reported that Vanessa had called a mandatory management meeting. Through a voice message sent from the restroom, he described her instructions. All founder-era records were to be classified as expired. Employees who spoke with me would be suspended for confidentiality violations. The shredding contractor had been moved from noon to 10 in the morning. She knows something, Raphael whispered. Clara is checking people's phones at the production entrance. Mateo told him to stop sending photographs unless he could do so without risk. Your testimony matters more than one additional page, he said. Raphael refused to leave. His wife, Elena, later told me he had packed his lunch as usual and placed a copy of the pension list inside their freezer under a bag of peas. He said if they took his phone, I should call this number, she said, handing me Mateo's card. Her voice was angry, not frightened. I told him no job deserves this. He said that was why he had to stay long enough to protect the people who could not walk out. We met Elena at a 24-hour pharmacy where she bought blood pressure tablets. Fluorescent lights made everyone look tired. She showed us messages in which Raphael had objected to inventory moving without invoices. Vanessa replied that loyalty would determine whose health coverage survived restructuring. That message established retaliation risk. Mateo added it to the petition. Shortly before midnight, Lucia received an email from her hospital's compliance office confirming that Vanessa had submitted a complaint against her. The complaint alleged Lucia sought confidential pricing information to benefit a family ownership claim. Attached was a fabricated email that appeared to come from Lucia's account. The hospital's technology department had already identified inconsistent routing data. The message originated from an external server and used a display name trick. Still, Lucia had to surrender her work laptop for review and was temporarily removed from procurement committees. She sat in Mateo's break room, holding a paper cup of coffee. I know they are following procedure, she said. But it feels like she reached into my work and made everyone look at me differently. I remembered standing beneath the anniversary lights with Evelyn written on a visitor sticker. That is what public accusation does. Even when people say they are neutral, you can feel the question in the room. Were you angry with me for asking why you did not notice the rent? Yes. She looked surprised. And you were right to ask. Love does not require us to pretend questions do not hurt. It requires us not to use the hurt as a reason to stop answering. Lucia leaned against me. Her hair smelled faintly of hospital soap. When she was 7, she used to sleep beneath my cutting table with one hand wrapped around my ankle so she would know if I stood up. I rested my palm on the same dark hair and wished I could still protect her with something as simple as staying in place. At 12:40 a.m., Bruno Garza arrived with the phone he used during the seal transaction. He had kept it powered off in a drawer after changing jobs. The device contained photographs Clara sent as examples, an old Arturo Vela signature, the training seal impression, and the blank final page of a transfer agreement. One message from Clara read, "The page will be signed already. We need your part to make old paper believable." Another asked whether embossing could be done without damaging printed ink. Bruno responded with instructions about moisture and pressure. He had known it was not a film prop. "Why tell us now?" I asked. He looked toward Adriana. "Because she showed me the defect in the seal. I thought I sold something no one could trace. When I saw that crescent, I understood the plate had testified before I did." Adriana did not soften. "You sold authority that was not yours. Cooperation changes what happens next. It does not change what you did." Bruno nodded. He signed the declaration. By 2 in the morning, every evidence item had an origin, custodian, and purpose. The strongest pieces formed a simple chain. Original ownership documents proved my rights. Forensic analysis and print logs undermined the transfer. Bank records showed the staged payment. Witness files established the forgery process. Photographs and messages proved imminent destruction. The story inside me remained sprawling and painful. The story we would tell the judge had to be clean. Mateo's office became an assembly line of truth. The conference table disappeared beneath numbered exhibits, sworn declarations, bank certifications, and photographs. A pot of coffee burned down to black syrup on the warmer. Outside, midnight traffic hissed across wet pavement, but no one mentioned sleep. Adriana prepared 12 comparative plates showing my authentic signatures from 2016 through 2026. She marked pen lifts, tremor patterns, slant variation, and the repeated ink skip copied from the tax authorization. Her report ran 78 pages. Each conclusion carried a confidence level and a list of alternative explanations considered and rejected. "Do not write that it is obvious," Mateo told her. "I never do. Obvious is not a measurement." Sophia signed a declaration describing the signature search, the graphic design file, the executive office printer, and Vanessa's instruction to make the transfer appear settled before the reserve movement. Bruno Garza provided his bank record and the message chain with Clara Mendez. Rafael described the legacy asset purge, the disposal order, and the scheduled shredding. Lucia authenticated the cafe recording and submitted the original phone file with its metadata intact. I signed my own affidavit at 1:42 a.m. It described the partnership history, the 2018 offer of 7,600,000 Mexican pesos, the anniversary humiliation, and my denial that I had ever sold for 84,000 Mexican pesos. Mateo made me read each page aloud. "Why aloud?" I asked. "Because Vanessa's strategy depends on portraying you as confused. I want you to hear your own chronology and catch anything that does not belong." On page 9, I corrected the time we reached the warehouse from 11:40 to 11:27 because Lucia's parking receipt established it. On page 14, I removed a sentence saying Vanessa always intended to steal the land. I could prove what she did, not what she had always intended. That distinction mattered. Anger wanted the largest possible accusation. Justice required the narrowest accurate one. At 3 in the morning, Rosa and Martin arrived with signed pension declarations. They brought a bag of tamales wrapped in foil because, Rosa said, courts might run on paper, but people did not. Steam carried the smell of corn dough and roasted pepper through the office. We ate standing over the exhibit list. Raphael sent one final photograph from inside the warehouse. 6 gray archive boxes had been stacked beside an industrial shredder rented for Thursday morning. A handwritten sign read Disposal Authorized, V. Rourke. Behind the boxes, the false partition in Vanessa's office showed a fresh line of white caulk. Mateo completed the petition at 5:18 a.m. He requested an ex parte preservation order, temporary judicial access to Lot 14B, forensic imaging of company servers, suspension of asset transfers, and appointment of an interim administrator. He did not ask the judge to award me the company that morning. He asked only to stop destruction and preserve the disputed property. We filed electronically at 5:43 and delivered hard copies when the commercial court opened at 8. Judge Isabel Cardenas Trejo scheduled a private evidentiary hearing for 10:30. Her clerk warned us to bring originals and be prepared to explain why ordinary notice would create greater harm. The courtroom was smaller than television courtrooms, with pale wood benches and a wall clock that ran 2 minutes fast. Judge Cardenas wore no theatrical expression. She read while we waited, turning pages with a rubber fingertip. Adriana testified first. She explained why exact duplication of accidental defects supported mechanical reproduction and why the print chronology conflicted with the stated date. The judge asked whether an authentic signature could have been scanned with permission. It could, Adriana said. But the questioned document represents a witnessed wet ink execution. The physical evidence is inconsistent with that representation. Mateo played only 90 seconds of Lucia's recording, including Vanessa's statement that dates served transactions and that the paper problem would be gone by noon. He showed the judge Raphael's photograph of the shredder and the legacy purge list. Then the judge looked at me. "Mrs. Mercer, If this order issues and your ownership claim later fails, the company may suffer substantial disruption. Do you understand that? Yes, Your Honor. Why should the court act without hearing Ms. Rourke first? My mouth went dry. I thought of the paper cup collapsing slightly in my hand, the visitor sticker pulling a thread from my dress, and the machine falling into steel. None of those injuries alone justified an emergency order. Because she can answer us after the records are preserved, I said. She cannot answer with records she has already destroyed. Judge Cardenas held my gaze, then asked for Daniel's original land deed and the lease schedules. Mateo placed them before her with certified registry copies. She compared the signatures, the lot number, and the collateral filing. At 12:16 p.m., she signed a 21-page order. It prohibited destruction or removal of business records and inventory, authorized court officers to enter Lot 14B, required immediate imaging of specified servers, suspended Vanessa's authority to transfer assets above 25,000 Mexican pesos, and appointed accountant Miriam Solis as temporary custodian. Police assistance was authorized if access was refused. The order bore a blue court seal and Judge Cardenas's wet signature. I had imagined feeling victorious. Instead, I felt the weight of the folder in Mateo's hands. A court order was not applause. It was responsibility backed by consequences. Service begins at 1:30, Mateo said. The client inspection starts at 2. We drove to Apodaca in 3 vehicles. Court Officer Luis Benavides rode with the forensic technology team. Administrator Miriam Solis carried an inventory protocol and portable scanner. Adriana transported the Juki's documented machine head in a padded evidence case because Mateo intended to establish the asset connection at the site. I wore the same navy dress from the anniversary, repaired where the visitor sticker had lifted the thread. Lucia had suggested another outfit, but I wanted no costume for what came next. I pinned Daniel's 3 blue stitches inside the cuff where only I could feel them. At 1:38, we turned onto the industrial road. The warehouse glass reflected a hard white sky. Black vehicles lined the front entrance for the Northeast Care Network delegation. Through the windows, I saw Vanessa presenting a wall of uniform samples. Officer Benavides approached the reception desk and asked for Vanessa Rourke. The receptionist called upstairs, listened, then said Ms. Rourke was unavailable and no legal visitors could enter during the inspection. Benavides displayed his credential and the court order. This is not a request for an appointment. Vanessa appeared behind the glass doors. Her ivory suit had been replaced by deep purple, and the gold watch remained on her wrist. She saw me standing beside Mateo and stopped. For 10 seconds, no one moved. Then she opened the door halfway. Evelyn has no authority here. The court does, Benavides said. He handed her the service copy. Vanessa read the first page, skipped to the signature, and called her attorney. She spoke rapidly, turning away from the clients who had begun watching from the showroom. Her attorney must have advised compliance, because she returned and said the order could be executed through the loading bay to avoid disrupting business. Benavides consulted the site map. The named property owner and her counsel will enter through the principal access. Ms. Rourke, the custodian, needs you at receiving to identify restricted storage and supervise temporary surrender of access credentials. Vanessa stared at him. The reversal was so exact that for a moment I wondered whether justice had a memory of its own. 19 days earlier, I had crossed broken asphalt beside the compactor while my name stood over the front doors. Now Mateo held the glass door for me, and Vanessa walked along the east corridor toward the loading bay with a court officer beside her. Inside reception, the same assistant who had taken my founder badge stood behind the desk. Clara Mendez wore a silver executive credential on a blue lanyard. Miriam asked all employees with unrestricted access to surrender badges during the preservation search. Clara removed hers with stiff fingers. Miriam prepared temporary passes. She handed me a laminated property claimant, court-authorized badge. Vanessa received a white visitor card marked limited access. "This is humiliating," Vanessa said. Benavides answered, "It is administrative. Please wear it visibly. Tell me in the comments. What would you have done in my place?" I did not smile. Humiliation had almost broken me because Vanessa designed it to suggest I had no worth. The court's restrictions were different. They protected evidence and applied according to the order. Even so, when Vanessa clipped the visitor card to her purple jacket, I remembered the squeak of blue marker across my paper sticker. The client delegation gathered near the stage. Their procurement director, Helen Ward, asked whether the inspection should be postponed. Miriam explained that the company remained operational but was under a judicial preservation order involving ownership and financial records. She did not embellish. Vanessa tried to take control. This is a vindictive family dispute. Mrs. Mercer sold years ago and regrets the price. Adriana opened the padded evidence case. The restored Juki head rested inside, its green enamel scraped but recognizable. Beside it, she placed the original 1987 receipt and the photograph of Daniel and me at the partnership registration. This asset is identified in the founding contribution ledger and on the disposal order executed 19 days ago, Matteo said. Its serial plate connects the original ownership records to the current disputed filing. Raphael stood near the production entrance. When Vanessa looked at him, he lowered his eyes, but he did not step back. Miriam ordered the executive office sealed first. Clara claimed the key was missing. A locksmith arrived under the order's authority and opened it in 7 minutes. The office smelled of gardenia air freshener and new leather. A marble desk faced windows overlooking the production floor. On one wall hung a photograph of Vanessa alone beneath the company logo. The technology team disconnected no systems. They attached right-blocking devices and began forensic images while operations continued on isolated terminals. Every drive received a hash value. Every cable was photographed before movement. Adriana watched the procedure with the concentration of a surgeon. At 2:11, a shredding contractor drove into the loading yard. Raphael intercepted the truck and directed the driver to Officer Benavides. The work order, signed by Clara, covered 26 boxes, not 6. It specified pulping with no certificate-level itemization. The boxes were found behind a movable acoustic panel in a conference room. They contained payroll registers, original partnership minutes, and pension authorization forms. Several folders had my name on the spine. Vanessa said they were duplicates scheduled for lawful disposal. Then preservation will inconvenience you, not incriminate you, Matteo replied. At 3:04, Miriam noticed that the measurements of Vanessa's office did not match the exterior wall. The interior was 46 centimeters shorter. Freshcock outlined a decorative bookcase behind the marble desk. Officer Benavides asked Vanessa whether the wall concealed storage. No. The locksmith examined the molding and found 2 magnetic latches beneath the lower shelf. The entire bookcase shifted forward 6 centimeters. Vanessa stepped between him and the opening. The order does not authorize demolition. No demolition is required, Benavides said. He pulled the unit outward. Behind it was a narrow steel door with a keypad. Miriam asked for the code. Vanessa refused. Her attorney, now present by video call, argued that the compartment contained personal property outside the order. Judge Cardenas held an emergency telephone conference. After reviewing the office floor plan and Sophia's declaration, she clarified that concealed business records within the named premises fell under the Preservation Authority. Vanessa entered the code herself at 4:22 p.m. The compartment's fluorescent light flickered on. Shelves held original ledgers, blank forms already bearing reproduced signatures, sealed bundles of cash, 2 external hard drives, and a red accordion file labeled Lot 14B. On the floor sat the silver executive case Vanessa had carried to the anniversary reception. Adriana did not move until the photographer completed a full visual record. Then she lifted the top blank form under alternate light. My copied signature glowed differently from the surrounding ink. The red file contained the original collateral application, lender correspondence, and a side agreement promising Vanessa a 3,400,000 Mexican pesos success payment once the hospital tender funded. One email instructed Hector Rourke to keep pension diversions below automated reporting thresholds. Another discussed moving fabric inventory if the widow becomes difficult. The cash totaled 682,000 Mexican pesos. Serial numbers on several bank straps matched withdrawals from VR Strategic Consulting. The most damaging item was a handwritten checklist in Vanessa's compact, angular script. Old signature source. Notary impression. New account for settlement. Backdate transfer. Move reserve. Pledge lot. Tender certification. Destroy founder records. No one spoke for several seconds. Vanessa sat in her leather chair. The limited access card hung crooked against her jacket. That notebook is private brainstorming. It proves nothing completed. It will be evaluated with the completed transactions, Mateo said. The client delegation left at 5. Helen Ward gave Miriam a sealed notice suspending Mercer Rourke's tender application pending review. Vanessa watched through the office window as the black vehicles departed. I expected satisfaction. Instead, I remembered the first hotel order Vanessa won for us. How she returned to the workshop carrying a contract in both hands and laughing because she had talked the buyer from 300 coats to 800. Talent had once lived in her without cruelty. Somewhere along the years, control became the only proof she accepted of her own value. Miriam tagged the marble desk, leather chairs, artwork, and gold-trimmed display cabinets as potentially purchased with diverted funds. The Juki, by contrast, received a protected evidence tag and was placed in a secure training room under joint custody. You put my office furniture on a seizure list and keep that wreck? Vanessa asked. The wreck has a documented owner, Miriam said. Your furniture requires tracing. At 6:30, the initial search ended. Vanessa was permitted to leave with her handbag after inspection. Company security, now reporting to Miriam, escorted her through the main corridor. At the glass doors, Benavides served her with notice of the commercial hearing scheduled for Monday. She turned to me. You will destroy the business just to prove you existed. The sentence reached for the oldest wound she had given me. No, I said. I am proving the business existed before you decided only your part counted. Monday's hearing lasted 9 hours. Vanessa's attorneys argued that I had voluntarily transferred my interest and later developed seller's remorse. They produced the forged agreement, the dormant account statement showing the 84,000 Mexican pesos deposit, and 2 witnesses who claimed to have seen me at Notary Office 77. One witness was Clara. Under direct examination, she described me wearing a red blouse and signing at 4 p.m. on September 14, 2021. Mateo then introduced hospital records showing I had been admitted that afternoon for a wrist fracture after slipping in my bathroom. Lucia had driven me to the emergency department at 2:38. Security video showed me leaving with a cast after 6. Could you have mistaken the date? Mateo asked. Clara said she remembered because it was Vanessa's birthday. Vanessa's birthday was November 9th. The second witness, Hector Rourke, claimed the signing occurred in the morning. Phone location records placed him in McAllen, Texas, until 3:17 p.m. He then admitted he had not witnessed the signature, but had signed a prepared statement because Vanessa said the transaction was legitimate. Adriana testified for 2 hours. She avoided every invitation to exaggerate. When Vanessa's attorney suggested that age made my signatures inconsistent, Adriana displayed 100 authentic samples across 12 years. Variation is evidence of natural writing, she said. The question signatures problem is not inconsistency. It is impossible consistency with an accidental defect from a specific source document. She demonstrated the matching ink skip, the contradictory toner sequence, and the print log proving the page did not exist on its stated date. Bruno authenticated the seal source. Sophia authenticated Vanessa's instructions and the graphic file. The dormant account manager testified that onboarding had occurred remotely using scanned identification. The email address belonged to Clara. The phone number belonged to a prepaid device purchased near the Apodaca warehouse. I had never accessed the account, and all funds moved to VR Strategic Consulting. At 4:48 p.m., Judge Cardenas ruled from the bench. She found a strong likelihood that the transfer agreement was fabricated, declared it provisionally void pending final judgment, restored my voting and inspection rights, and continued Miriam's administration. She prohibited Vanessa from entering the property without written authorization. The judge then addressed the warehouse title. Because Lot 14B belonged personally to Daniel's estate and me, Mercer Rourke had lacked authority to pledge it. The lender received notice that its lien was disputed and that collection against the land was stayed. Vanessa stood before the ruling ended. Her attorney touched her sleeve, but she pulled away. This court is rewarding sentiment over commerce, she said. Judge Cardenas's voice did not rise. This court is preserving property rights supported by original documents. Sit down. Vanessa remained standing. A bailiff approached. Only then did she return to her chair. After the hearing, we drove to the warehouse to deliver the updated order. Employees gathered quietly near the showroom. Miriam removed Vanessa's nameplate from the executive office and replaced it with temporary administration. She did not hang my name there. I had no desire for that room. Company security manager Omar Ledesma met Vanessa at the doors when she arrived, demanding access. 19 days earlier, his hand had closed around my forearm. Now he read the order, asked her to surrender her executive credential, and escorted her toward the parking area. Vanessa looked through the glass at me. I stood beside the Juki, which Raphael had mounted on a temporary steel table. Its handwheel turned after cleaning. The motor was disconnected for safety, but the needle bar moved smoothly. The machine had been called obsolete junk before an applauding room. Now the court's evidence seal rested beside its brass serial plate, and the company's luxury furniture carried seizure tags. Every reversal hurt more than I expected. It did not erase what happened. It made the shape of it visible. That night, the warehouse remained open under court supervision. No one was permitted to remove a box, connect a storage device, or enter the executive office without signing the access log. Miriam established a temporary command table in the showroom where Vanessa had served sparkling wine. The blue centerpieces were gone, but faint circular marks remained on the polished concrete where the reception tables had stood. Raphael brought extension cords, folding chairs, and a commercial coffee urn from the break room. He placed ceramic mugs beside it until Miriam reminded him that every object in the building technically belonged to the disputed company. Then inventory the mugs, he said. People still need coffee. She did. 1 urn, 24 white mugs, 6 chipped, replacement value 1,920 Mexican pesos. It was the first line in the emergency operations ledger, and the absurd precision made us laugh for the first time in days. The laughter did not last. The server images revealed deleted folders labeled owner cleanup and retirement normalization. Forensic software recovered index entries, but full extraction would take time. The technology team created cryptographic hashes and copied the data to sealed drives. 1 set went to the court, 1 to the prosecutor, and 1 remained with Miriam. I watched green progress bars advance across black screens. Modern evidence lacked the romance people imagined. It was patient, silent, and frequently boring. Hours passed to preserve a file that might contain 1 useful sentence. The original ledgers from the false wall were easier to understand. Daniel's handwriting filled the early volumes. He wrote totals with a narrow 7 and crossed each 0. After 2016, Vanessa's initials appeared more often. By 2021, pages had been removed with a blade so cleanly that only paper fibers remained at the binding. Adriana used side lighting to reveal impressions on the following sheets. On 1 missing page, pressure marks formed my name, the figure 84,000, and the phrase settlement account. A later page carried an indented list of employee surnames matching the 16 pension files. Even absent paper leaves pressure, she said. The concealed hard drives contained scanned identification, signature samples, and templates for bank letters. There were folders for me, Rosa, Martin, Raphael, and 11 others. Vanessa had built personal kits from employment records. Each kit included a government ID, utility address, emergency contact form, and signature source. Lucia stood behind me as the file names appeared. She did not improvise this. No, I said. She stocked people like fabric. The sentence made me think of our earliest inventory system. Daniel and I recorded every roll by color, width, and intended order because we could not afford waste. Vanessa had taken the discipline of a workshop and turned it toward human vulnerability. At 9:20 p.m., Miriam gathered department supervisors. Production had orders due Monday. 2,400 laboratory coats, 1,100 kitchen aprons, and 780 maintenance uniforms. The bank had temporarily restricted outgoing transfers above 25,000 Mexican pesos, including payroll batches. If the restrictions were not clarified by Friday afternoon, employees might not be paid. The order protected evidence, Miriam said. Now we have to keep protection from becoming paralysis. She and Mateo called Judge Cardenas's clerk and requested operational authority for verified payroll, utilities, and supplier payments. They submitted employee counts, bank files, and a proposed dual approval process. At 11:07, the judge issued a supplemental order allowing ordinary course expenses with daily reporting. Payroll went out at 11:46. I stood beside Miriam when the bank confirmation arrived. The total was 1,284,730 Mexican pesos. For most people receiving it, nothing unusual happened. Their pay appeared when expected. They bought groceries, covered rent, or paid school fees without knowing how close a court dispute came to delaying them. That invisible normality felt like our first success. Vanessa called 3 supervisors from her personal phone despite the access restriction. She told them Miriam intended to close the plant and move production to Saltillo. 2 workers left mid-shift in panic. Rafael gathered the floor teams near line 3 and asked me to speak. I climbed onto no stage. I stood beside a stack of unfinished coats, close enough to see loose threads on the top bundle. I will not promise that every week will be easy, I said. The company has debts and damaged trust, but there is no order to close this plant. Payroll was released tonight. Existing orders remain active. If that changes, you will hear it with documents in front of you, not through rumors sent from a private phone. A press operator asked whether Vanessa was coming back. The court has restricted her access until the hearing. After that, the court will decide what the evidence supports. Another worker asked whether I would take over. The old version of me might have said yes, because uncertainty frightened people. Not alone, I replied. No one should hold unchecked authority here again, including me. Rafael translated the answer for 2 employees more comfortable in Spanish, then invited questions. We remained there for 40 minutes. Some questions had no answer. Miriam wrote those on a board and posted updates the next morning. At midnight, Lucia drove me home to shower and change. The house felt strangely untouched by the day. A dish towel remained draped over the sink. One of Daniel's shirts still lay across the bed from our document search. I ran hot water over my hands until the machine oil smell faded. Sleep would not come. I sat on the edge of the bed holding the visitor sticker Clara had removed from my dress. Lucia had found it clinging to the lining of my handbag. Evelyn was still visible in blue marker, the final end smudged. I had kept it as proof of cruelty. Looking at it now, I saw how easily an object could become a shrine to injury. Daniel had hidden receipts in a working machine, not because he worshipped paper, but because he wanted truth available when needed. I placed the sticker in an evidence envelope, labeled it Anniversary Access Identification, and stopped carrying it in my handbag. At 2:15 a.m., Mateo called. Vanessa's attorneys had filed a motion to dissolve the preservation order and exclude the warehouse evidence. They claimed Sophia's declaration was coerced, Rafael stole confidential photographs, and the hidden room exceeded the order's scope. The hearing had been moved to 8:30 Monday. We expected this, he said. You expected it. I was hoping she might suddenly confess and save everyone paperwork. Hope is not prohibited. It is simply not our litigation plan. The next day, Adriana reconstructed the sequence of the forged transfer in the warehouse training room. She did not need to know who performed every physical step to explain the document. First, a genuine signature from my 2016 tax form had been scanned at 600 dots per inch. The accidental ink skip became part of the image. Someone then altered its scale and combined it with the shortened final stroke from a later specimen. The composite was printed faintly as a guide or transferred through pressure. Blue ink followed the path with nearly uniform speed. The completed signature page passed through a laser printer during a second stage, creating contradictory toner overlap. Finally, Bruno's genuine training plate embossed the paper, and Arturo Vela's reproduced signature was added. Why use blue ink at all? Lucia asked. Why not print the whole signature? Because lenders and judges look for signs of an original, Adriana said. Wet ink creates confidence. The mistake was believing wet ink creates truth. She compared the paper fibers with stock found in Vanessa's concealed room. Both carried the same manufacturer's watermark and batch pattern. The warehouse package had been purchased in July 2022, 10 months after the alleged signing. The page claimed to exist before its paper was manufactured. That fact required no interpretation of memory, grief, or family conflict. It was impossible in the most ordinary physical way. Matteo prepared me for cross-examination. He asked questions more aggressively than Vanessa's lawyer later would. You received money after September 2021, correct? Yes. You stopped attending weekly management meetings, correct? Yes. You allowed Ms. Rourke to describe payments however she wished because you did not read the statements, correct? I allowed her operational discretion. I did not authorize false ownership records. Is it possible you signed and forgot? No. At 66, you claim perfect memory? No. I claim a wrist cast, hospital video, bank records, a signature my hand could not make, paper manufactured later, and money moved through an account I never controlled. My memory is not the only evidence. Matteo stopped. That answer. Keep it. He also warned me not to argue with questions, not to volunteer motives, and not to look at Vanessa when answering. Your audience is the judge. The advice carried me back to the anniversary reception, where Vanessa had made the audience her weapon. She relied on glances, social embarrassment, and the confidence of a microphone. In court, performance would matter less than foundation. Raphael faced a harder decision. If he testified, Vanessa would accuse him of stealing company information and manipulating disposal records. He admitted paying the salvage driver 1,600 Mexican pesos to divert the Juki from the contracted recycler. That could be characterized as unauthorized control of company property, Matteo said. It was Dona Evelyn's property. We believe that. At the time, the company's system listed it otherwise. Raphael looked at me. Would you have the machine if I followed the ticket? No. Then I will explain exactly what I did. Matteo included the fact rather than hiding it. Raphael had not taken the machine for profit. He preserved it, reported its location, and surrendered it for evidence. The same act Vanessa called theft allowed the court to connect the serial number to original records. Sophia's preparation was emotional rather than legal. She had to describe years of compliance without making herself either innocent or responsible for everything. Adriana sat with her in the cafeteria while rain tapped the loading windows. I kept telling myself the next instruction would be the one I refused, Sophia said. Then refusing became harder because I had obeyed the previous one. That pattern is why coercion works, Adriana replied. But the court will still ask what you did. Answer it. Do not turn shame into vagueness. Sophia admitted altering 3 spreadsheets and preparing a false reconciliation schedule. She preserved the original versions in a hidden cloud folder. The prosecutor later considered those admissions when arranging her cooperation. By Sunday evening, the warehouse evidence had produced another discovery. The Red Lot 14B file included an appraisal invoice paid from my stolen retirement reserve. Vanessa had used 62,500 Mexican pesos of my pension money to value the land she planned to pledge without my consent. The insult felt almost too carefully designed. Lucia wanted to highlight it in every filing. Matteo refused. It is powerful, but the source tracing is preliminary. We use it after the bank certifies the path. Once again, law required patience at the exact point emotion wanted speed. Before the Monday hearing, I visited the Juki in the training room. The machine head sat on its temporary table beneath evidence seals. I could not touch it, so I stood with my hands folded. Daniel, I said quietly, I wish you had told me directly. In memory, he answered with the expression he wore when a repair should have been obvious. He had told me in ledgers, receipts, keys, and a letter. What he could not do was live my courage for me. I left the room before sunrise. The glass front doors reflected my navy dress and gray hair. I no longer looked like the woman who had entered through the loading bay expecting someone else to confirm her place. I looked tired, frightened, and prepared. The commercial ruling opened doors that our private accusations never could. Banks that had answered Matteo with delays now produced certified records within hours. The pension authority assigned investigator Maribel Cruz Ayala, a woman with close-cropped gray hair and a habit of reading every number twice. The state prosecutor's financial crimes unit obtained copies of the forensic server images. The lender hired independent counsel and froze undisbursed portions of the 18,700,000 Mexican pesos loan. Miriam's first full accounting report covered 312 pages. Vanessa and Hector had routed 2,460,000 Mexican pesos through false consulting invoices, diverted 1,475,300 Mexican pesos from 16 worker pension accounts, transferred my 984,600 Mexican pesos reserve, and removed inventory worth 1,860,000 Mexican pesos. Another 3,118,900 Mexican pesos had been spent on expenses with no business purpose. Vanessa's SUV lease, renovations to a condominium in San Pedro, designer furniture, private travel, and the gold watch she wore at the anniversary. The watch had cost 286,400 Mexican pesos. I stared at that figure longer than the millions. During the same year, Rosa postponed dental treatment costing 24,000 Mexican pesos because her retirement balance had fallen short. Numbers do not feel shame, but they reveal where shame belongs. The lender's tracing analysis found that only 9,200,000 Mexican pesos of its loan had reached legitimate company operations. Vanessa used the rest to cover earlier diversions, pay Hector's shell company, and fund the tender campaign. Because the loan had been procured through false collateral documents, the lender filed its own criminal complaint rather than attempting to seize Lot 14B. The warehouse continued operating under Miriam. That mattered more to me than seeing Vanessa punished. 113 employees depended on weekly pay. Orders already in production could not wait for emotional closure. I returned to the cutting floor on Tuesday wearing flat shoes and carrying Daniel's old measuring tape. Some workers applauded when I entered. I raised my hand until they stopped. "We are not celebrating a case that is not finished," I said. "We are making uniforms." The cleanest proof that this company deserves to survive is honest work delivered on time. Raphael showed me the hospital jackets with uneven pocket seams. We traced the problem to a misaligned folder attachment on line 4, not worker carelessness. I spent 2 hours beside a technician adjusting it. The smell of warm fabric and oil returned me to the back room of our Guadalupe house so vividly that I expected Daniel to appear with cinnamon tea. At lunch, employees gathered around folding tables. Miriam explained the temporary controls, dual signatures above 25,000 Mexican pesos, direct pension confirmation, weekly inventory reports, and a whistleblower line administered outside the company. No executive could alter retirement instructions without employee verification. Rosa raised her hand. "Will the missing money come back before I retire?" Miriam did not offer comfort she could not guarantee. "We have frozen 4,780,000 Mexican pesos across related accounts. Insurance coverage may add 1,600,000. The court will prioritize employee funds, but timing depends on claims." Rosa nodded. Certainty, even incomplete certainty, was more respectful than promises. That afternoon, prosecutors executed search warrants at Vanessa's condominium, Hector's office, and the storage facility holding the fabric. All 1,860,000 Mexican pesos in inventory was recovered, still wrapped in manufacturer plastic. Investigators also found the laptop used to isolate my signature and an envelope containing copies of 15 other employee identification cards. Vanessa was arrested 2 days later after leaving a meeting with her attorney. The charges included aggravated fraud, use of forged documents, unlawful diversion of retirement contributions, identity theft, and fraudulent encumbrance of property. Clara and Hector faced related charges. Bruno received conditional consideration for early cooperation, though he still answered for selling the seal impressions. I learned of the arrest while repairing a sleeve sample. Lucia saw the alert on her phone and watched my face. "Do you feel better?" she asked. The needle in my hand was threaded with navy polyester. I tied a knot before answering. "I feel that a process has reached her. That is not the same as feeling better." Vanessa was released pending trial under financial restrictions and a travel ban. Some people online complained that wealthy defendants always walked free. Others demanded prison before evidence had been tested. Mateo reminded us that legal revenge was a contradiction. What we wanted was legal accountability. "If we demand procedure only when it protects us," he said, "we do not believe in procedure. We believe in power." The final commercial judgment came 7 weeks after the anniversary reception. Judge Cardenas voided the transfer agreement permanently, confirmed my 52% partnership interest, declared the collateral pledge against Lot 14B unauthorized, and awarded provisional damages subject to the restitution process. Her written decision described the forged sale price as commercially implausible and the witness accounts as materially false. The court approved a restitution pool funded by the frozen accounts, recovered inventory savings, crime insurance, and sale of traceable luxury assets. 16 pension accounts received principal, statutory interest, and correction costs. My reserve was restored. After professional fees and audit expenses, 611,400 Mexican pesos remained in a protected contingency account. Rosa received confirmation 3 months before her planned retirement date. She brought the letter to the warehouse in a plastic sleeve and asked me to read it aloud. Her corrected balance included 112,940 Mexican pesos in principal and interest. When I finished, she kissed the paper and then laughed at herself. "It is only a statement," she said. "No," I replied. "It is time someone tried to take from you." Martin used his restored funds to reduce his work schedule and take his grandson to speech therapy. Raphael's wife received the medication plan they had postponed. Sophia's coercive debt agreement was canceled because it formed part of the scheme. She later accepted an accounting position with a manufacturing cooperative in Saltillo. Lucia's hospital investigated Vanessa's procurement allegation and cleared her completely. The cafe recording showed that the complaint had been threatened as leverage. Lucia was promoted to unit supervisor 6 months later, not because of the case, she insisted, but because she had earned it. I agreed and did not embarrass her by crying until I reached the parking garage. The Northeast Care Network tender was withdrawn from Mercer Rourke's application cycle. Losing 31,200,000 Mexican pesos in potential business frightened everyone. Miriam and I met with department heads and calculated what survival required. We reduced executive expenses, sold Vanessa's leased presentation vehicles, renegotiated 2 fabric contracts, and focused on existing regional clients. No one lost a job. That sentence eventually became simple enough to say, but living toward it was not simple. For 12 weeks, every Friday felt like a test the company might fail. We had orders, but limited credit. Suppliers had read about the case and wanted payment before releasing fabric. Clients asked whether uniforms would arrive on time. Employees came to work while wondering whether the next legal notice would lock the doors. Miriam created a 13-week cash forecast and taped a copy inside the glass meeting room. Red numbers covered the first version. We needed 2,940,000 Mexican pesos to meet payroll, utilities, insurance, and materials through the next major customer payments. The frozen accounts belonged to restitution and could not be used as operating money. "We will not save the company by borrowing from the people we are trying to repay," she said. The obvious solution was to mortgage Lot 14B lawfully. A bank offered 8,500,000 Mexican pesos secured by the land once the false lien was removed. Everyone looked at me because the property was mine. For one night, I considered it. The loan would make the red numbers disappear. It would also place our home for 113 jobs beneath the new bank's power. Daniel's warning had not said never use the land. It said never surrender it without independent counsel. Mateo reviewed the proposal and pointed to a variable interest clause. If revenue fell below a covenant, the rate could rise 4 percentage points. The bank also required personal guarantees from me and Lucia. "No," I said. Miriam did not argue. "Then we need 2.94 million from operations, asset sales, or unsecured credit." We began with the executive expenses. Vanessa's SUV lease cost 38,700 Mexican pesos a month. 2 presentation vehicles cost another 44,000. The San Pedro office suite, used mainly for client lunches, cost 96,000. Corporate memberships, private security upgrades, and a luxury coffee service added 51,300. Canceling them saved money immediately, but penalties consumed part of the gain. The San Pedro landlord demanded 6 months' rent. Mateo negotiated 3. The vehicle company accepted early return after learning the leases might be tied to fraudulent approvals. We sold and used cutting equipment stored behind line 7. One computerized table brought 640,000 Mexican pesos from a manufacturer in Querétaro. A photography studio purchased the anniversary display wall for 42,000. The crystal glasses fetched only 8,600 at auction. I watched workers pack them in straw sleeves. The glass that had clicked against my paper cup was indistinguishable from the rest. I did not ask which one it had been. Our largest fabric supplier, Textiles Barragan, refused another shipment without 900,000 Mexican pesos in advance. Its owner, Carlos Barragan, had known Daniel and me since the workshop years, yet his credit manager treated us as a new risk. History is not collateral, the manager said during our meeting. The phrase irritated me because it was true. I brought 12 months of confirmed orders, Miriam's cash forecast, the court's administration order, and production quality reports. Rafael brought sample codes from the current line. We did not ask Carlos to trust friendship. We asked his team to evaluate present facts. After 3 hours, Textiles Barragan offered stage delivery. 1 week's fabric against 300,000 Mexican pesos, then additional releases as customer payments cleared. The price increased 2%. It was not generosity. It was workable commerce. Your husband used to bring me sweet bread when he wanted 30 days more. Carlos told me as we left. Did it work? Once. After that, I ate the bread while he signed the note. Daniel's memory warmed the room without replacing the contract. That balance became our model. We called every major client before they called us. Some procurement directors appreciated the directness. Others reduced orders. One hotel group canceled 1,300 uniforms because its board wanted no association with scandal. The cancellation left embroidered fabric that could not be used elsewhere. A younger sales manager suggested removing the hotel logo chemically and selling the shirts as seconds. Rafael tested the process and found it weakened the fibers. We rejected it. Instead, the hotel agreed to buy the cut pieces at cost after Mateo showed that cancellation terms covered customized materials. The payment was only 218,000 Mexican pesos, but it kept the fabric from becoming waste. Quality improved as soon as workers stopped hiding mistakes. Under Vanessa, supervisors received bonuses for low reported defect rates. They had learned to reclassify defects as alterations or customer preference changes. Miriam removed that metric. For 6 weeks, the reported defect rate rose from 1.8 to 5.9%. At first, buyers panicked. Then corrective work reduced actual returns. By the 3rd month, honest defects fell to 2.4%. The numbers looked worse before the work became better. That lesson applied beyond sewing. Every Wednesday, Maribel Cruz held pension clinics in the break room. Employees brought statements, contribution histories, and questions. She projected no personal balances on the wall. Instead, workers sat individually with advisors while a representative explained how withheld amounts, employer matches, interest, and correction credits should appear. Rosa attended every clinic even after her own account was corrected. She kept a notebook with tabs for each worker who asked for help. No private amounts were recorded, only deadlines and document names. I spent 23 years matching plaids at side seams, she said. I can match deposits to pay slips. She discovered 2 errors unrelated to Vanessa's scheme: a transposed identification number from 2013 and an uncredited contribution from a prior employer. The A4 corrected both. Recovery had made workers inspect systems they once accepted as mysterious. Martin brought his grandson to one clinic because childcare failed. The boy sat under the conference table with a tablet, practicing words. When he pronounced Raphael's name clearly, everyone applauded. Martin covered his face and cried. No financial report captured that moment, yet it was one of the reasons the report mattered. The restoration of the Juki took place in stages. Tomas Villasenor arrived carrying a wooden toolbox polished by decades of use. He refused to call himself an expert. Experts charge before opening the cover, he said. Mechanics open it, then decide how embarrassed to be. He removed the bent needle bar, drained contaminated oil, and laid each screw on a white cloth in the order it came out. The internal gears showed less wear than newer machines he serviced because Daniel had changed oil faithfully. Someone loved this ugly thing, Tomas said. 2 people did. Machines do not care about love. They care about maintenance. Fortunately, love sometimes remembers maintenance. The motor insulation had cracked, so we replaced it with a safer unit while preserving the original casing. Tomas repaired the table crack using walnut braces rather than filling it invisibly. He straightened the thread stand, but left a shallow bend from the fall. It should not pretend the container never happened, he said. The repair cost 27,850 Mexican pesos, approved by the Operations Council as training equipment. I offered to pay personally. Rosa objected. The company threw it away, she said. The company repairs it. Otherwise, restitution becomes a hobby for the injured person. She had learned Mateo's language well. When Tomas powered the motor for the first time, everyone expected drama. The Juki made one dry click, then a low continuous hum. Oil rose through the sight window. The needle moved so quickly it became a silver blur. I placed a strip of unbleached cotton beneath the foot. My right hand remembered the distance before my mind did. I pressed the pedal gently and sewed a straight line 30 centimeters long. The stitches were too tight at first. Tomas adjusted the tension half a turn. On the second line, the machine sounded like the back room in 1989. Daniel cutting collars. Lucia breathing beneath the table. Rain striking the roof while I counted bundles of 12. I stopped before memory could take the present away. Maya, the apprentice who later asked why we kept the old machine, was watching from the doorway that day. She had applied for work because her mother knew Rosa. Her technical school grades were average, but she could identify fabric grain by touch and had repaired her own backpack without a pattern. Would you like to try? I asked. I have only used digital machines. Then your hands are about to meet a machine that does not make decisions for you. She sat, placed both palms too close to the needle, and pressed the pedal hard. The fabric shot backward crookedly. She jerked her foot away. It hates me. It does not know you exist. That is useful. Try again. I showed her how to guide without pulling. The second seam curved. The third held straight for 10 centimeters. By the sixth, she could feel when speed exceeded control. Teaching her changed the meaning of the machine. It no longer existed only as evidence of what Vanessa did or a container for Daniel's papers. It became useful again. The same question faced me. Was I returning to the company to work or merely to occupy the place Vanessa had denied me? For the first month, I attended every meeting. I corrected seam allowances, questioned invoices, and reviewed bank reconciliations. Soon I noticed employees waiting for my opinion before offering theirs. Founder's authority can silence a room even when the founder intends kindness. During an operations meeting, Raphael proposed changing the cutting schedule to reduce overtime. I disliked the plan because it separated fabric inspection from spreading. The old method had worked for years. We ran the numbers, he said. The change saves 68,000 Mexican pesos monthly. And quality? The pilot had fewer shade errors. I looked at the sample report. He was right. Still, I felt resistance rising from somewhere below reason. Daniel had designed the old sequence. Changing it felt like discarding another part of him. Miriam noticed my silence. Is there a documented risk, Evelyn? There was not. No, I said. Run the new schedule for 30 days. After the meeting, I went to the training room and sat beside the Juki. Preservation did not mean freezing every method at the moment Daniel last touched it. Vanessa's error was not modernization. It was using modernization as permission to erase ownership, people, and limits. I began choosing which meetings truly required me. Production standards, apprentice training, property oversight. I stopped attending sales sessions simply because my name appeared on the building. Lucia watched the change with relief. You were becoming the boss you said no one should become. I was becoming a very polite version. Polite control is still control. Her honesty no longer felt like disloyalty. That was one of the quieter repairs between us. Aaron visited from Texas in August. He walked through the warehouse, carrying Daniel's old camera, the heavy film model our son had inherited. At Lot 14, B's boundary marker, he recreated the 2007 photograph of Daniel standing in mud. This time, I held the wooden stake. The industrial road behind me was wider, and the skyline had changed, but the lot dimensions remained 5,400 square meters. Dad wrote that it was yours, Aaron said. Ours. Now mine. Someday yours and Lucia's, unless we create something better. We met with an estate attorney and placed the land in a family trust with restrictions against using it as collateral without independent appraisal, beneficiary notice, and court-supervised consent during my incapacity. The trust lease required fair rent and prohibited ownership claims by occupancy. The legal fees were 94,000 Mexican pesos. 10 years earlier, I might have called that wasteful. After nearly losing property worth 28,900,000 Mexican pesos, clarity seemed inexpensive. Aaron asked whether placing the land in trust meant I expected to die soon. At 66, I expect to die eventually and make lunch tomorrow, I said. Planning for one should not cancel the other. We ate lunch at a roadside restaurant where Daniel once negotiated thread prices over grilled meat. Aaron told stories about his father's habit of saving bent nails. Lucia joined after her shift, and for the first time since the case began, we spoke about Daniel without every memory becoming evidence. The criminal investigation required more interviews. Prosecutors asked me to identify company practices from years earlier. Each session lasted 3 or 4 hours. They showed me invoices, calendars, and emails stripped of context. Sometimes I remembered, sometimes I did not. Saying, "I do not remember," frightened me at first because Vanessa had used memory against me. Adriana taught me that uncertainty stated accurately strengthened reliable testimony. A witness who remembers everything is usually remembering a story, she said. A witness who distinguishes knowledge from assumption gives the court something usable. I learned to say, "I recognize the form but not the signature." I attended the meeting but do not recall that statement. I know the amount from the certified record, not personal memory. Those sentences restored confidence more honestly than pretending certainty. Vanessa's defense sent investigators to my neighbors. They asked whether I forgot appointments, misplaced keys, or repeated stories. One neighbor, Mrs. Ortega, told them I once left beans burning on the stove after Daniel died. She came to my house afterward, ashamed. I answered because they said it was about your health, she said. Did the beans burn? Yes. Then you told the truth. The defense later cited ordinary lapses as evidence of cognitive decline. Mateo responded with my medical evaluation and, more importantly, objective records. The case did not depend on remembering where I left keys. It depended on where money moved, when paper was manufactured, and whose fingerprints appeared in digital files. The attack still hurt. Ageism does not need to prove incapacity. It needs only to make every certainty look suspicious. I underwent a cognitive assessment voluntarily. The neurologist, Dr. Helena Price, tested recall, sequencing, attention, language, and spatial reasoning. I performed within normal range for my age, with mild stress-related sleep impairment. Her fee was 12,600 Mexican pesos. A normal score does not mean you never forget, she said. It means forgetting an appointment is not evidence that you transferred a company. I laughed harder than the sentence deserved, mostly from relief. The restitution calculations took weeks because each diverted contribution had a different date and lost return. Maribel's team reconstructed what every account would have earned under its actual fund. They did not simply return principal. They calculated statutory interest, missed gains, and administrative correction charges. Rose's account required 29 separate entries. Martin's required 34. One younger worker, Elena Ruiz, had only 18,900 Mexican pesos diverted, but because it occurred during a high-growth period, her lost returns added 6,440. Small thefts compound too, Maribel said. Vanessa's lawyers challenged the interest model. A court-appointed actuary reviewed it and found Maribel's calculations conservative. The final restitution order adopted the model. When the first corrected deposits appeared, workers photographed their screens. Miriam asked them not to post account details publicly. Instead, we created a confirmation board with anonymous codes. 16 boxes changed from pending to funded over 4 days. Rosa insisted the last box belonged to me. You started the company. You wait like the rest of us. My reserve posted at 4:03 p.m. on Thursday. Principal, lost interest, and adjustment totaled 1,072,880 Mexican pesos. I checked the account twice, then signed the confirmation form. The money did not feel like a prize. It felt like a door returned to its hinges. I used none of it for the company. That boundary mattered. I moved part into a diversified retirement account, kept an emergency reserve, and paid 85,000 Mexican pesos toward my mortgage balance. Lucia accompanied me to an independent advisor who did not work for Mercer Workwear. Dad would approve, she said. Your father would bring 3 calculators and distrust all of them. We chose a plan anyway. The decision to form a cooperative emerged from a worker committee, not from me. Raphael proposed employee voting units. Rosa demanded pension oversight. A sales manager wanted outside board members. Miriam insisted on audited financial statements available to all unit holders. For 6 evenings, 40 employees attended design sessions after shifts. They argued about voting thresholds, profit distributions, disciplinary authority, and whether founders deserved permanent veto rights. Someone suggested I hold a golden share allowing me to block major decisions. The room waited. No, I said. What if another Vanessa takes control? A machinist asked. Then the system must stop her. If only Evelyn Mercer can stop her, we have built another weak system. The final charter required 2/3 approval for asset sales, independent review for related party transactions, direct employee confirmation for pension changes, term limits for council members, and protected reporting channels. No founder veto. No executive could hold more than 10% of voting units. Mateo reviewed the charter and found 18 problems. The committee corrected 16 and argued successfully against 2. One dispute concerned emergency spending. Mateo wanted a lower threshold. Miriam demonstrated that machine breakdowns could exceed it and halt production. They created a documented emergency exception with 48-hour review. Watching them disagree without punishment felt revolutionary. We chose the name Mercer Workwear Cooperative after a long debate. I proposed removing Mercer entirely. Rosa objected. Erasure is not repaired by a different erasure, she said. The name should stay, but the structure should tell the truth. The cooperative purchased the operating assets from the old partnership under court supervision. My 52% interest converted partly to cash, partly to non-controlling units, and partly to a settlement of unpaid distributions. Vanessa's 48% remained subject to forfeiture, creditor claims, and restitution. None of her disputed value funded her defense ahead of worker claims. On conversion day, we signed 246 pages. My hand ached after the first hour. Adriana attended only as a friend, but she examined the signature blocks out of habit. Each signature is different, she said. Should I worry? No. Today, difference is honest. The notary read the material terms aloud. I interrupted twice to ask for plain language. No one sighed. No one called the questions emotional. When I could explain the structure back, I signed. The first rent payment from the cooperative to the family trust was 92,000 Mexican pesos. It arrived with a statement showing the lease period, tax withholding, and authorization signatures. I printed it and placed it in the new land file, not beneath kitchen tiles, but in a fireproof cabinet whose index Lucia and Aaron both possessed. Transparency was less romantic than Daniel's hidden compartment. It was also safer. The company could no longer continue under the old partnership structure without inviting another concentration of power. With court approval, we reorganized as Mercer Workwear Cooperative. I retained protected land ownership and leased Lot 14B under transparent terms. Employees acquired voting units through payroll contributions capped so no person could control more than 10%. Miriam became chief financial officer for a 2-year stabilization period. Raphael joined the operations council. Rosa, who had never imagined herself in management, chaired the pension oversight committee. I refused the title of chief executive. You fought to recover control, Lucia said. Why give it away? We were sitting on my porch after rain. The wet concrete smelled like childhood summers, and water dripped from the crooked awning screw Daniel never fixed. I fought to recover a voice, I said. Control without limits is what damaged us. I accepted the title of founding production advisor and worked 3 days a week. My pay was 18,000 Mexican pesos monthly, approved by a committee whose members included no relatives. The arrangement gave me dignity without pretending my body was 40 again. The criminal case moved more slowly. Clara pleaded guilty to identity misuse and evidence concealment. receiving a suspended sentence conditioned on restitution and testimony. Hector admitted controlling VR strategic consulting and forfeited 2 properties bought with diverted funds. Vanessa rejected a plea offer. At trial, her defense argued that every questionable act had been intended to save the company. The pension diversions were called temporary liquidity management. The forged transfer was described as an imperfect memorialization of an oral agreement. The collateral pledge was framed as an emergency measure necessary for expansion. I testified for a day and a half. Vanessa sat at the defense table in a plain navy jacket without her gold watch. She did not look at me while I described the anniversary reception. Her attorney asked whether grief had impaired my involvement after Daniel's death. Yes, I said. Grief impaired my attention. It did not sign a document. He asked whether I had accepted consulting payments after the alleged sale. I accepted payments represented as reduced partner distributions. Their labels in Vanessa's private books do not change what I was told. He displayed a photograph of me smiling beside Vanessa in 2023. Does this look like a woman who believed she had been robbed? It looks like a woman who did not yet know. Adriana's testimony occupied 2 full days. The prosecution projected the repeated signature defect across a courtroom screen. Bruno identified the training seal. Sophia identified the signature isolation file. The emergency room video destroyed Clara's original witness account. Bank records traced the stage sale payment in and out of the false account. The handwritten checklist from the concealed room connected intention to sequence. Old signature source. Notary impression. New account. Backdate. Move reserve. Pledge lot. Tender. Destroy. The jury returned guilty verdicts on the principal fraud, forgery, identity theft, and pension diversion counts. Sentencing occurred later. The judge imposed a term consistent with statutory ranges, ordered restitution jointly with the co-defendants, and prohibited Vanessa from serving as a company officer during the post-release period. I will not pretend the number of years repaired anything. Prison is consequence, not restoration. Vanessa asked to address the court. She said she had built Mercer Rourke into a serious company while I clung to sentimental objects and outdated methods. She said every employee had benefited from her risks until those risks became unpopular. Judge Cardenas, presiding over related restitution matters though not the criminal sentence, had once described the difference more clearly. Stewardship accepts limits. Control treats every person and object as material for one ambition. I did not speak to Vanessa after sentencing. There was no final private confrontation, no perfect sentence that made her understand. Some people imagine justice culminates when the wrongdoer sees the victim's worth. I learned that my worth did not depend on her seeing it. 6 months after the court order, the warehouse looked different without becoming unrecognizable. We replaced the anniversary display wall with a transparent production board showing orders, safety numbers, pension deposits, and quality returns. The glass office became a shared meeting room. Vanessa's marble desk was sold for 74,000 Mexican pesos, and the proceeds entered the restitution reserve. The Juki was fully restored by an 80-year-old mechanic named Tomas Villasenor. He replaced the bent thread stand, rebuilt the motor, and repaired the table using walnut braces visible beneath the crack. Do not hide the brake, he told me. A hidden repair teaches nothing. We installed the machine in a bright training room overlooking the production floor. It was not placed behind glass. Apprentices learned straight seams on scrap cotton before advancing to computerized equipment. The Juki's motor still hummed in the low register I remembered, though Tomas warned us to run it only in short sessions. On the first training day, a 19-year-old apprentice named Maya asked why we kept such an old machine. Because new technology should make skill stronger, not make history disposable, I said. She guided a strip of white cotton beneath the presser foot. The stitches came out even, 6 to the inch. I showed her the 3 blue stitches Daniel used inside my cuffs. She added 3 to the sample and wrote the date beside them. That afternoon, we held the first annual restitution and governance meeting. The pale folding tables were set with ceramic coffee cups, not crystal glasses and not dented paper. Everyone received the same cup. Rosa brought sweetbread. Raphael's wife made cinnamon tea from Daniel's recipe, which Lucia found on an index card in my kitchen drawer. At the head table lay certified copies of pension confirmations, the cooperative charter, and the final property order. No person's photograph hung above them. Miriam read the audit results. Every restored account reconciled to the peso. The contingency reserve remained 611,400 Mexican pesos. Worker representatives approved quarterly external review. When the meeting ended, employees signed the charter in a ledger bound with navy cloth. I used the fountain pen Daniel gave me on our 25th anniversary. My arthritis made the first stroke tremble. I paused between Evelyn and Mercer, exactly where my genuine signature had paused for years. Adriana stood beside me. She had come without her evidence cases and wore a rust-colored scarf. After the others left, we carried coffee to the loading dock. Sunset turned the concrete apricot and gold. Trucks moved along the industrial road with their lights beginning to show. My mother would have liked this place, she said. She believed every honest business should have a chair where a worker could sit without asking permission. There were 6 metal chairs beside the dock now. Raphael had placed them there after the cooperative vote. Do you ever stop thinking about the house you could not save? I asked. Adriana held her cup in both hands. No, but I stopped believing that every later case could change that earlier ending. Your case mattered on its own. That had to be enough. I understood. For months, people had told me Daniel would be proud. Perhaps he would. But justice could not be a message sent backward to the dead. It had to serve the living people standing in front of us. I thought the court order would make me feel restored, I said. It restored rights. That is different. What restored you? I looked through the open training room door at the Juki. Its work light cast a small circle over the steel plate. Beyond it, Maya had left her practice strip with 3 blue stitches at the end. Being useful without being owned, I said, and learning that accepting help is not surrender. The air cooled. Somewhere beyond the warehouses, a vendor rang a small bell as he pushed a cart along the sidewalk. The sound carried across the loading yard, delicate against the heavy engines. Lucia joined us after her shift. She still wore hospital scrubs, and fatigue shadowed her eyes. She brought Daniel's letter in a new archival sleeve. We had decided to keep the original in the bank box and a copy in the training room. Read the last line again, she said. I did. You built more than I did, even when I was the one people thanked. For years I had treated that sentence as praise from a husband. Now I heard its warning. Work disappears when no one names who performed it. Sacrifice becomes permission when the giver never keeps a record. Love should not require a person to erase herself. We closed the warehouse through the glass front doors. I paused outside beneath the company sign. It now read Mercer Workwear Cooperative. The letters were modest blue steel, not anniversary gold. My surname remained, but it no longer belonged only to me. It named a history and a promise of transparent work. Lucia drove me home through evening traffic. At my kitchen table, I placed the navy dress across the back of a chair. The repaired thread where the visitor sticker had been was nearly invisible. I could have removed the 3 blue stitches from the cuff and saved them in a box. Instead, I left them where they belonged, inside something still in use. Before bed, I made cinnamon tea in Daniel's chipped brown mug. The taste was stronger than I remembered. Rain began softly on the awning, passing over that crooked screw with the same hollow note I had heard on the night Adriana first called. The machine that fed my children had survived the scrap container. The documents hidden beneath its oil pan had survived years of dust. But survival was never the whole lesson. Objects endure by chance. Dignity endures when people defend it with truth, records, witnesses, and the courage to accept one another's help. If someone has made you feel obsolete because your work is old, quiet, or no longer fashionable, remember that usefulness is not measured by another person's appetite for control. Keep your records. Ask questions before silence becomes consent. And when honest help arrives, open the door. Thank you for staying with me to the end. Tell me what you would have done in my place, and carry this story with you if it reminds you of someone whose work deserves to be named. A new story arrives every week, and until then, may no one mistake your kindness for permission to erase you.